All right, so we have a, I should say, we'll start with our Pledge of Allegiance. Right. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And then we have some announcements and board openings.
So I think just for administrative, we should just mute everybody so we don't get feedback until we have public comment. So.
Thank you, Bill. And so we have some board and committee openings tonight. We have Human Rights Commission opening, 5 openings that we'll be discussing tonight. The Hamilton Historic District Commission has 2 openings. The Zoning Board of Appeals has an opening. The Open Space Committee has an opening. And the Planning Board has 2 associate member openings. And now we have time for public comment for 3 minutes on topics for anything not already on the agenda. If anybody wishes to speak, they are more than welcome to at this time.
Hello.
Someone say something? Calling user 1 was talking.
Oh yeah, Tosh Blake here.
Hi Tosh, did you want to say something in the public comment section?
Yeah, just one quick little housekeeping thing. I was just waiting to see if on YouTube, the Human Rights Commission meeting you guys hosted, the kind of forum, still hasn't been posted yet. I was just wondering if that's going up anytime soon.
I have a real hard time hearing Mr. Blake. Can he speak louder?
Yes.
I can summarize if that's all right, Tosh. Tosh was wondering if the Human Rights Forum that we hosted was online yet. And Joe, do you know if HWCAM has put it up yet on YouTube?
It's not up on HWCAM's YouTube page yet, but it is up on the Town of Hamilton's YouTube page. Evidently, Bill doesn't have a recording of it for some reason, but I did tell him today that we would send him over our copy of ours so he could use it at HWCAM. But the Town of Hamilton has its own YouTube page, and the meeting is up there as well. So.
Oh, good. I didn't even know the Town of Hamilton had its own YouTube page. I thought it was all through HWCAM. That's fine. Yeah, just I guess in the future, I assume when the committee gets going, subsequent meetings will be posted to the YouTube channel?
Yes. Yes, as all meetings, you have minutes, and with the advent of Zoom, you'll have a video recording as well.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be on YouTube though, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just checking for that because, yeah, it's easy for me to get it on YouTube. I don't have Zoom on my computer. But, okay, that's all I want to know. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tosh. Anyone else? Right. If not, we'll go ahead and start with some selectmen reports. Let's start with we'll start with Rosie tonight. Rosie, you're on mute. Just FYI.
There you go.
So, really the thing that's been occupying space front and center is the Town Hall Building Committee, which I know we're going to talk about tonight. So I won't introduce any of my comments until then. I would just talk about, as one of the organizers for the Human Rights Forum that we held on March 4th, I was very impressed with the participants, and a special thank you to Joe Borsellino for moderating it, to Mandy Zagorowski, Carol Mazzetta, and Steve Harrington for sharing their thoughts.
Give me a second.
And specifically to other residents who shared their stories, it was very poignant. It was, for me, it was, it evoked much empathy in me, and I'm very glad that we had the opportunity to talk about these things. So thank you to everybody. It was really a very moving endeavor. And that's pretty much it for me tonight, Sean.
Let's go to the bill next.
Sean, hey, everybody. It's weird to have daylight outside when we have our meeting, so it's nice. So I'll give an update on the school board. They've been working obviously very hard over the last days and weeks and months. So I'll give a quick synopsis that represents hours and hours of meetings. But obviously people know they voted to open K through 12 full in-person start on April 5th. So that is good news for our community. They are going to let the families who want to remain remote to remain fully remote for the rest of the year. So a nice concession there. The teachers are in the middle of vaccinations. It won't matter whether they're not vaccinated to return, but the good news is I don't have the counts, but a majority of the teachers have started that process. And they also approved the budget on a 5-2 vote, approved the budget. So that is what's up with the school committee. In terms of the planning board, there's a meeting tomorrow. They'll be looking at some zoning opportunities to change some zoning downtown and maybe make some future flexibility developing some properties that are adjacent to the commercial district downtown. So tune in tomorrow for that to hear more specifics on that sort of rezoning. It'll be a long discussion, no decisions to be made, just a dialogue that we're starting to have in town. So that is all I have to report, Sean.
Great, thanks, Bill. Darcy, anything to add tonight?
Hi, sorry about that. Yes, I want to acknowledge and celebrate that this is Women's History Month through the whole month of March, which is appropriate, right? Marching women. Also, belatedly, there was International Women's Day, March 8th. I just want to mention some of the milestones over the centuries. Title IX, which was passed in 72, codifying in our laws which prohibit anti-woman discrimination in all federally funded education programs. Women fought for the right to vote and won this precious right on May 21st, 1919. And it was finally ratified August 18th, 1920. So it's been 100 years, but we haven't really been able to celebrate it because of the COVID virus. So hopefully we will be able to celebrate our 100 years soon. We're still waiting for the ERA, which has been fully ratified, which has not been fully ratified by the states. I guess it's stuck in the Senate, but we'll work on that. And I think that's just about it. I just wanted to celebrate our unrecognized heroines. We know that women were essential for the founding of this country, and we are essential to the future of this country. So I just wanted to lay that out there because it's mid-March. No one mentioned it yet, so I thought I would.
Great, thank you, Darcy. Mm-hmm. Jamie.
Yeah, so I guess in line with, I guess some stuff to report related to both the Affordable Housing Trust and the Hamilton Development Corporation, and that they, if anybody's been around Willow Street, you'll notice that there's work going on towards the Willow Street project by Trickworth Company that will consist of some commercial property and some housing units, including some affordable housing units.
All right, thanks, Jamie. I was going to mention that as well, but Jamie beat me to the punch. Other things going on. Bill mentioned the school committee. What else? Oh, CPC meeting we had this last Thursday, where we had a application for a grant from the Town Hall Building Committee for some additional CPC funds, an additional $1 million in bonding for the project. It was passed unanimously by the CPC, which is good news because then it is not on the general tax of the town. If the project is approved, it gets from CPC funding, which has already collected monies, and a share from the state, which is always good. I think there was something else I was going to mention, but I forget it at the moment. And if I remember, I'll chime in later with it. Joe, anything to share from the town manager report?
Yeah, I'll try to be really brief though, because I know we have a full agenda tonight. wanted to let folks know that the members of the Hamilton Council on Aging Board are volunteering some of their time as we're getting into the spring and hopefully seeing some things relax as far as COVID-19 restrictions. We're going to be looking to open up the senior center very lightly. About 10 to 12 people at a time could visit just for a couple hours a day. We're not going to be restarting programming just yet, but we know that throughout the pandemic, one of the major concerns for seniors has been social isolation. And thanks to the help of the volunteers and the Council on Aging Board, we hope to be able to announce, a loose schedule of 2 to 3 days a week where the center would be open for drop-in hours, 2 to 3 hours, so that seniors that wanted to could come down, sit 6 feet away from their friends and have a little bit of a visit. There are other restrictions. We'll be posting information to the website this week about how to do that. They'll have to have their temperature taken when they come in and write down their name and phone number so that we can track them in case something unfortunate happens. But we definitely want to try to start to look at reopening and allow for some socially distant socialization at the senior center. We'll also be announcing this week an opportunity for a grab-and-go dinner for seniors that would be in celebration of the coming of spring. We're finalizing the details, and folks should look at our website this week for the details. We're going to ask residents that are 65 and older to pre-register for the meals by calling Accord Food Pantry. The town is, through the Council on Aging Board, is partnering with a caterer out of town to have the meals, but we need to get a good count by this Friday. So folks should be looking at the town website by tomorrow to figure out how to call it and register for one of those meals. So I will just say also progress continues on the cell tower for everybody who's always calling and asking. That's all I have for today.
All right, thanks, Joe. And tonight we have a department head report from Chief Stevens from the Police Department. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your time, and although you do have a healthy agenda, I promise to keep it somewhat short. So I just want to brief the board up on a few things, and if Joe would go to the first slide. So as the board knows, we are an accredited agency. We've been accredited since 2012. We were 48th in the state to be an accredited police department. So if you're accredited, to give you a frame of reference, there's only 95 departments in the entire state that are fully accredited, and we were 48th overall. And we've maintained our state accreditation since 2012. And to maintain your state accreditation, you have to meet a minimum of 300 mandated standards created by the commission. So every 3 years, you have to become reaccredited. So we are up for our reaccreditation. So in June 21st to the 25th, our department will be reaccredited. We'll have assessors from various departments that will be coming in, and they will be ensuring compliance. They'll be looking at policy and procedures, our facility, our equipment, and they'll be reviewing all that stuff. And then there's a question and answer period. I have to sit in front of them as well as other officers to answer questions about policies, to show proof of compliance that we're following through with our policies and doing what we said that we're writing, that we're doing what we said we're saying we're doing. So we'll be meeting on that. So if any of the board members, you're more than welcome to come to be part of it. If you want to sit and listen, if you want to ask questions, I open it up to you. You're more than welcome to be part of that process. And Joe, if you could give me the next slide. So what does it mean to be fully accredited? And I'm very proud of our accreditation status, because it's not easy to get and it's not easy to maintain once you do have it. So as a fully accredited department, for example, we have to record and review all motor vehicle stops made to include the race and sex of every operator that we stop. So we review that as a department as a whole, and we also have to review each individual officer. And then we have to provide those statistics to the board, the reviewing board. So we review this yearly to look at all those. We review at every arrest made. We look at the department as a whole for arrests made, and we look at every individual officer. So why do we do it? So we review these for trends, we review these for issues, and for training purposes. Every officer, there has to be a checks and balances with police officers. So every officer gets their stats reviewed, to include myself. And we look for trends as well. And also for an accredited agency, we have to review policies every year. Now, policies are great, but if you don't review them with your officers, it really means nothing. It's black ink on a white sheet of paper makes a nice shade of gray. So if you don't review them with your officers and ensure compliance, they mean nothing. So every year there are several policies that we're mandated to review with our officers. There are exams that we give our officers. And as part of this, for example, use of force, we review use of force policy every year, de-escalation procedures every year, our pursuit policies every year. So those are just some of the policies that we review. So I just wanted to touch on the accreditation to give it a little snapshot that it's coming up, and I'm going to be sending the board a letter. Mr. Chairman, I'll be sending that to you yourself, just giving you the official notice that we're being accredited and that you're all welcome to come as well to that. And Joe, if you give me the next slide. So I'm going to shift gears to training for a little bit. So every year, police officers in Hamilton were mandated, police officers across the state were mandated to do in-service training. And for us in-service training this year, it was first aid CPR, which is normal, firearms, which are normal. So for us this year, for example, so I can explain it to you. So domestic terrorism is mandated by the state for us to have that training, defensive tactics, legal updates training for all the new laws, implicit bias training for every officer, responding to pandemics and similar emergencies. Those were some of our mandated trainings to do as well. And they also had one called longevity in law enforcement. We have a lot of people retiring. We had 2 retire from our department recently, and throughout the Commonwealth, they're seeing a lot of people retiring from the law enforcement field. And it's more, what are you going to do after you retire? Also for the training, what we're doing as well is above and beyond the mandated training that we have, I'm also always looking for additional types of training. We talk about de-escalation procedures. Well, it's hard to teach de-escalation procedures. And the more training I get these officers, the more experienced they are. It's like common sense. You cannot necessarily teach common sense. It's through experience, it's through training, it's through education. You start learning about this kind of stuff. So I'm always looking for training. And recently I reached out to Dr. Alara, who lives in our town. And through his office, I'm working with his office to do some mental health training for our officers, how to deal with people that may have some mental health issues, how to respond to that, to those types to issues that people may have with mental health. So we're working on that right now. And actually his office has been really receptive. We've already have a PowerPoint put together, and one of their clinicians is going to come down to teach it. I've reached out, I'm kind of doing a I reached out with the Topsfield chief, Wenham chief, Middleton chief, and us. And we're going to set the training up at Topsfield. And then, so Topsfield is going to host the training, and Dr. Laura is going to provide the training for us. So that's up and coming as well. And Joe, you could go to the next slide, please. I also wanted to show you some stats, and it's interesting. I track the stats every year, and I can go back, do a 5-year look back. I can do a 10-year look back, but I just want to give a little comparison between 2019 and 2020. And I know it might be a little tough seeing, and I tried to blow the numbers up a little bit for you. So our calls for service dropped in 2020. And it's interesting because 2020 was predominantly calendar year, was predominantly a COVID year. We see we saw a drop in call volume for our motor vehicle citations. Naturally, motor vehicle citations dropped, all motor vehicles stopped, all motor vehicle enforcement kind of dropped. And I will say that I am a big supporter of education, not tickets. I believe educate someone first, enforcement's always secondary. And I've always said that since I've been here for 12 years. So we've seen some of because of COVID, we saw a lot of a decline. So normally we run an average of 20 to 25,000 calls a year, calls for service a year. And this year we're down to the 17,000. And it's interesting too, like even our calls for animal control have dropped, because our animal calls in 2019 were 588, and we dropped to 300. And part of that was a lot more people were home. So you didn't have the running dogs around. You didn't have a lot of those types of animal calls. But if you have a chance and you look through these numbers, and I can send this PowerPoint to each one of you so you can actually look at it after if you have any questions about statistics and what's dropped and what's climbed. But for most of all, the call volume for 2020 has dropped. Joe, if you go to the next one. So go back one, Joe. So the grants, I wanted to touch on grants a little bit. And so for grants, so in 2020, so we got a state 911 grant of, and I put the numbers up there, $7,835. And that's for training for dispatchers. So that covers the training aspect. And then we got what they call a support and incentive grant, which was $27,501, which went to the salaries. So those are grants I apply every year. We've never been denied those grants. Those are for dispatch grants. So those go for ECO. I've never been denied them. And the numbers have been going up a little bit. We are also a primary PSAP. We do 911. So they give us a little more for doing 911. And then also this year, I applied for a highway safety grant. And there's $5,618 for education and enforcement, distracted driving, crossing, not stopping for people in the crosswalks. So that's kind of our education enforcement grant. We've got that money. Body camera grant. So I did a grant to EOPS and we ended up receiving a little over $22,000 for body worn camera program. So we're going to be not one of the first in Essex County, but there's only a handful of us that are embarking on this program. And that's to put cameras on all our officers so every interaction will be recorded. And I'm reaching out to the DA's office because of some restrictions that I'll have with the officers having body worn cameras. I already have the policy written for body worn cameras. The money's already been approved. The governor's office has already signed off on that. So that's coming down the road. And we also got a $1,300 grant from Med Project USA. And that is, we do drug takebacks. We have a drug take-back kiosk in the lobby. So you come drop off your drugs. We bag them. There's two officers bag them, photograph it, weigh it, take it to the place to get destroyed. And we get money for doing that to backfill costs for officers that do that. And Joe, if you'd hit that last slide for me. So the other thing, and I know I did an email and I want to put another shout out to, and this is to the community, not to the police department. So right in the middle of COVID in December, and I apologize to the selectmen because I brought this up before, but I'm very proud of our people in town. So right in the middle of COVID, we had a toy drive. And when we put the toy drive together, we didn't know what would happen with COVID and how many people would come out. We had over 1,500 toys that were donated this year, the largest donation we've ever had. And these toys went to the Shriners Hospital, Shriners Burn Hospital. And I got a nice letter from them, complimenting us for the donations and everything. But for us as officers being there right in the middle of COVID and seeing all these people come out, it was heartwarming. So I just want to throw this out to the people in town because it was really something. We had people that didn't even live in town that stopped, turned around, went and got a toy and came back. So it was quite a year for giving. So I was quite proud of that, of our residents in town and of the program itself. Hopefully this year, if COVID dies down, we'll be doing another Citizens Police Academy. And basically we do that. We were doing that every Tuesday night, and it's a couple hours every Tuesday for so many weeks. I know one of our selectmen, Rosie, went through that program. Several other townspeople have gone through it. We touch everything we do tours of the police department. You do ride-alongs. We talk about laws, investigations. We do a tour of the corrections facility in Essex. It's a great program. We had to put it on hold because of COVID. And hopefully if COVID decides to give us a break this year, then we'll put that back up and we'll be up and running on that again as well. Public Safety Day is in September. That's when we open up everything, and we'll see what happens with COVID. We didn't do it last year. Hopefully we'll be able to do it this year, a Public Safety Day again. Mr. Chairman, that is it. And if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Chief. Anybody questions for Chief Stevens or comments?
Yeah, I have a comment. Thank you, Chief. I hope you will send those PowerPoint slides because I think that they're very interesting, the statistics about everything. So thank you.
Thank you, Rosie. I will do that.
Thank you.
Chief, I noticed that you were talking about the body camera grant. Is that just for the cameras themselves? I know there's some type of storage you'll need to do a video and stuff like that. Is there a time frame from the state with how long you retain the video and what kind of servers it goes on? Is it a state server? Is it our server?
So good question. So originally when the cameras came out, there was a couple reasons for hesitation. One reason was the amount of storage that it was going to take to store the videos. And so what we have with the state is a couple different things. They paid for all the equipment, they paid for the chargers, they paid for the mounts, they paid for everything. Before I applied for the grant, I spoke to Andy, our IT person. I said, Andy, I do not want to enter this program. It's going to cost the town a lot of money for cloud service and storage. He goes, we have two servers at the police department, and our server at the PD is, he goes, you're all set. You have plenty of storage on our server. So I checked with Andy before I even went down that path, because I was concerned about that. It does get costly, although the costs have come way down now. Technology, what's new today is old tomorrow. So the costs have come way down on that.
Right. And will it be, once we kind of have that in place, will it be similar to our kind of tasers that we've got to replace batteries and things every handful of years? And would that be in a capital or in your operating budget?
So the batteries, I was fortunate when I did the grant, what we did was we tried to anticipate down the road. So there's warranties on the batteries. So what I ended up doing is I ended up buying, through the grant, I bought 2 batteries per officer, and I made a deal with the company about the life of the batteries. And if I store one, is it going to be good? So I'm not sure how long the batteries will go, because it's much like a flashlight. You put it on, you shut it off, you put it on, you shut it off. It depends how long they're on. So, but each one, I'll know more after the first year, Sean.
Gotcha. Thanks. And then just back to the slide that you had with the stats that Rhodesy was talking about.
Yep.
You know, it seemed like everything was down because of COVID. I would assume all the motor vehicle stuff is down because not as many people were driving. The animal calls and stuff, more people are at home watching their pets. One thing I did notice, it was up, and maybe it's not a huge uptick because we don't have that much crime, but kind of crime against persons and crime against property was up a bit from the previous year.
So
is there a rolling average, or is that, does it vary?
So no, so what's happening this year, and that was a good point you're bringing up, Sean, what's happening this year is fraud. We have a lot of fraud cases, unemployment fraud cases. I had one person walk in today. It's identity fraud and unemployment fraud. That's what spiked that particular number. And we're getting a lot of that. Actually,
yeah, that makes sense. You've got more ne'er-do-wells at home trying to scam people on the phone and all that kind of stuff.
Now, the other thing about the dog, Sean, so for the animal calls, they went down this year because everyone's home. My understanding is, however, I've read it, but I never researched it, that a lot more people bought animals, dogs, and so forth. So my curiosity is, okay, when people, whatever the new normal is, and people go back to work, does that mean the animal calls are going to go up after? Because now people aren't home with the dogs that they bought last year. So time shall tell on that one too.
Right. I think that's a good point. And like you said, I know a lot of people have gotten a dog or a cat since COVID started, and they're going to have all that separation anxiety when their owners go back to work, and I'm sure they'll be barking their heads off or whatever in the neighborhood and get a lot more calls. Any other comments for Chief?
Yes, I just want to say thank you, Chief. My family, my husband and I were victims of identity fraud this year, and your officer Trepanere went above and beyond and really helped us nail it down. And hopefully nothing else will happen. But it's a scary thing. They take your identity. So everyone needs to be really careful. We don't even know how it happened.
And sometimes they'll take it, you don't know how long they've had it for. So I always tell people, make sure you contact the state, make sure you contact your credit card companies, check your credit ratings as well. Make sure you watch your credit ratings, if they're floating up, floating down, to see if some people are using your credit cards, your debt to earning ratios change and your credit has changed. So I always tell people to check that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else, I'll say thank you, Chief. Keep up the good work. I think the accreditation is always kind of a feather in our cap, and I appreciate you taking the time and the effort, and not just yourself, but the whole department working on it is really a credit to everyone in the department.
I want to say thank you to the chief too.
Thanks, Carol. The other thing, Sean, I just want to throw out there is I'm very happy I'm on the board for the Human Rights Commission. I'm one of the board members as a chief, and I'm looking forward to that as well. I'm looking forward to the discussion, the dialogue, and I'm actually looking forward to having some of my officers present because I want them to hear all this. So I look forward to that upcoming, and I know you're picking, there's going to be selections made this evening or a discussion about voting your members at large. So I look forward to that commission coming together.
Great.
It'll be interesting.
All right. If there's nothing else for Chief, we'll move on to our agenda.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
We have our first thing on the agenda is approve the minutes of the Board of Selectmen meeting for January 19th, 2021. And Rosie, I believe you sent me an email earlier about some amendments to that. Is that correct?
You're
You're
on.
on mute again, Rosie.
Okay, sorry about that. Just that the date for closing of election applications papers is March 18th, and there's some obscure date on the minutes. So I thought I would mention that. And then there's just in the further discussions, it's just a minor typo. Just insert the word "to" in front of "talk with candidates."
Okay.
And that was all.
Anybody else? Any changes to the minutes? No. So Rosie, if you want to make a motion to approve those with the amendments, that would be great.
Sure. I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the January 19th BOS minutes with the 2 edits made by myself.
Second.
All right. I assume there's no discussion since we kind of just had it. So we'll do a roll call vote. We'll start with Rosie.
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Darcy.
Darcy Dale, aye.
Jamie.
Jamie Knudsen, aye.
Bill.
Wim Wilson, aye.
And myself, Sean Farrell, aye.
John, we can't hear you.
There we go. Sorry about that. Up next, thanks, Darcy. We have Jim here somewhere. There he is from Clifton Larson Associates, and he's going to give us the overview of our management letter tonight and our audit. Hi, Jim.
Thanks very much, Sean. Thanks, everybody, for having me. Sean, can you hear me okay? Great. Thank you. Before we get into things, I'll just give a brief rundown. My name's Jim Petrowski. I am the manager on the town's financial statement audit. Was the manager overseeing the town's fiscal 2020 audit. Have been the manager for the past 3 or so years on the town's audit. So once again, a pleasure to come and present the results of the audit with you. I do want to express my appreciation to Joe, as well as to Peggy and Diane and the accounting staff over at Town Hall for making the audit once again a very smooth overall process. Much appreciated to everybody involved. Now, I do have some key financial highlights, but just to give an overview as far as what we're engaged to perform, we need to opine on the financial statements, provide an opinion as to the presentation of the town's financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. With that opinion also comes a report on internal control, which will report if we identify any matters that we deem to be a significant risk of material misstatement to the financial statement. So not necessarily an opinion on compliance, but we'll report as to any significant matters that come up that could result in anything being misstated. And really the last key piece that Sean referred to is the management letter. We will identify things that may not arise to the control report, but still warrant some sort of communication to management as far as best practices to the report to the town, and really just areas for improvement, really to tighten things up, make sure things continue to run smoothly and don't arise to a significant finding. So this year, once again, the town received an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. It's the best opinion available, means the financial statements, in our opinion, are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. This year, there were also no findings to report in the internal control report over compliance, and nothing rose to that significance level, which would cause a significant deficiency in internal control or anything like that for the financials. And then as far as the management letter is concerned, we did have, once again, 6 comments. 1 was new, 3 of them are recurring comments, and then the remaining 2 are informational. So 1 removed from the prior year, but an additional new comment to add this year as well, which we'll get into a little more detail later on. Just to give a overview, just of some key financial highlights, the town's general fund balance at year end totaled $8.5 million. You'll see a breakout of this of this fund balance in the financial statements. I think the key figures to note is the unassigned fund balance of $5.2 million. That continued to rise really from the level of the 5-year trend. It was up significantly from the prior year. We're at around 17% of expenditures and transfers. So good to hear the town's continuing a healthy general fund balance. Also a $1.2 million fund balance reported in the stabilization fund as part of the general fund. And then just to give some insight on some of the key liabilities reported, the town's total OPEB liability for the health benefits of future retirees totaled $7.1 million at year end, a slight decrease from the prior year. You'll see in the financials, the municipal bond rate, the 20-year municipal bond rate was used to discount that liability for the current financial statements. And you'll see the sensitivity analysis where changes in that discount rate can impact that liability reported by a couple $1 million or so, depending on which way the rate goes. And then just another key liability to report on is just the town's share of the Essex Regional net pension liability. The town reported a share of $11.6 million at year end. That's a 2.75 or just about a 2.75% of Essex Regional share overall. It's down slightly from the prior year's percentage, which is around 2.76%. And again, the financial statements, similar to that OPEB disclosure, are going to provide some sensitivity analysis as far as that discount rate being used for that proportionate share of Essex Regional liability, which way the liability will swing dependent on the discount rate. So to get into the management letter, again, there were 6 comments. I'll just go through them briefly. The first comment, which was a new comment related to building permits, just we identified during the audit that in performing our procedures, we identified an immaterial variance between what the building department had reported for building permits versus what the town had recorded on the Munis General Ledger, which ultimately flows to the financial statement. So even though not material, we do just want to recommend a reconciliation be performed by the building department and by the accounting department, just to make sure that those balances stay on track and that any discrepancies are resolved before they become significant. So that was really the new comment for this year. Information technology, there were just some best practice recommendations, just had to implement a documented policy, the recommendation for external tests and assessments, the chief referred to earlier as far as susceptibility to fraud. We all know IT is a large issue, just we want to recommend best practice to have some testing performed just to mitigate any sort of fraud that could be happening. Password practices, again, a recommendation just to tighten up passwords to best practices as reported in our report. User access, we did identify a couple of users that still had access to town software even though they were terminated. And then the vendor management program, we did just want to recommend that the vendors the town is working with just continue to obtain the relevant reports they have to identify if there's any sort of deficiencies reported in their internal control reports. Just make sure that vendors are properly monitored from an IT standpoint. Cash receipts is another recurring comment, just making sure that considering the cost benefit of a central implementation of collection of cash receipts, minimize outside departments obtaining cash. I just want to recommend that the cash receipts are centrally maintained, really to provide more sound internal control there. risk assessment and monitoring plan. This is a continuing process. We know that the town is continuing to implement policies and procedures, and we just want to encourage the use of a risk assessment and monitoring plan just to identify if there's any departments of higher risk or any financial activities of higher risk. We always want to recommend that a formal plan be implemented and put into place. And then the last two are just informational comments. GASB 84 and 87 will be coming out, impacting the town's financial statements. 84 changing the reporting of fiduciary activities to really the town private purpose trust funds. Really not too much of an impact to be seen there from what we have. And then as far as the lease accounting and financial reporting standard 87, just going to require the town make some reporting changes to lease activities. It's going to require more uniformity. So it'll just be really important that the town continues to keep an eye on any lease agreements that may be coming up to make sure that we're aware of it as we approach the fiscal year 2022 audit, so that all of those leases we have the information available for those to be properly reported. So with that said, I'll open it up for any questions of the board.
Any questions for Jim or comments?
I have just one comment. Thank you. One question. Thank you, Jim, for giving us that summary. Question, where are the cash payments that you're concerned about, and what do you recommend for alleviating that? You said that's a continuing, is that one of the continuing concerns that you have?
Correct. And I wouldn't highlight any specific department, as a higher risk department as far as cash collections. This is just a comment where we do see that certain departments are collecting cash, that's inherently happening. That's really what we want to recommend, is that any department really collecting receipts, it really should be centralized at the treasurer's office. That's not necessarily to call attention to a specific department.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Right. Because I know some people come into the Treasury Department, and I, in fact, have used cash in the past to pay bills. Okay. All right.
Could I just offer, for instance, Rosie, if somebody comes in to buy a dog license, the past practice has always been that they pay the clerk for the dog license, and then that clerk has to deposit it with the treasurer. Or if somebody buys a fire permit, a burn permit, they pay for it at the fire station, they bring it up. So it's that kind of weakness in where cash receipts are being collected and how they're reconciled to the Treasury Department. We have actually started to work on that. In fact, the treasurer, all payments in the building are starting to be paid at the treasurer's window now, especially cash. So we're trying to address that. It's just been a little bit of a process to get there.
And then just give a receipt to the person, and they would go back and pick up whatever it is, that good or service. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense.
Joe, my only question, maybe I'll start with you, was just in terms of the journal entries. I mean, we look at the budget, we look in context of taxes in, taxes out, revenue in, revenue out, not in terms of journal entries, which adds up to like $72 million. It has a lot of liabilities on there. And so do we review the journal entries as well in terms of that 72? Is that something that FinCom's looking at in terms of that $72 million number? I mean, I know the audit looks at everything as sort of one document, one total, but we don't ever review that as sort of a number, that's $72 million in terms of journal. So if you can give me more context on how we could sort of, if we review that, and we should review that as part of our yearly,
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you to sort of tell me the context of that, sort of how we should sort of, because for us, we don't really see that number ever. And Sean, I don't know if you understand the question I'm asking you, but.
I mean, I think you got me a little bit lost too, I got to admit. So
there was a document issued by, that's basically all journal entries, and it has debits and credits, and it adds up to like 72. Because it has about a bunch of liabilities, debts, bonds on there. We don't ever really look at the town budget in terms of journal entries. So I just don't know if it's hard to look at that in context, understand that if we're doing the right thing or doing the right stuff.
The general ledger, the receipts are all reconciled on a monthly basis with the treasurer's office, and the accounts payable are all reconciled on a monthly basis in the accounting office. And they don't cross paths there, but they are overseen by the finance director. So each transaction's reconciled on a monthly basis. And the audit has highlighted that we've basically been doing a very good job of that. So there are a couple little things that the money always all matched up. But I think that maybe, Jim, what you talked about with the building permits might have been one of the issues that might be related to that in terms of we had a little bit of a different discrepancy between what building was reporting as in and what Treasury was reporting us in for a time, and then they eventually caught up to each other. So we're trying to tighten that up right now as well. But again, working with the Treasurer's office and the building department to close that loop. So the transactions get reviewed on a monthly basis.
Joe, if I could add, or Sean, if I could have the floor for a second.
Yeah.
Just to answer Bill's question. We certainly, as FinCom, will take a look at this letter. And in years past, Marissa at times would walk us through some of the journal entries. Most of them is just a matter of classifying in a sort of different account, as opposed to they may total up to a large amount, just because it might be, a significant amount of money that is classified in one sort of journal account, as opposed to, it's not like it's in a different bank account, it's just a journal account for accounting purposes. But at any rate, we would definitely take a look at that letter, and anything that's questionable, we'd certainly walk through. And I might take the opportunity, Jim, since in years past, sometimes we've done joint meetings with FinCom and the BOS to go over the audits. So I'd request having you available for a future FinCom meeting so that we could sort of walk through a similar presentation with the rest of the committee.
Yeah, my apologize to you, John. For some reason, it slipped my mind to invite you guys. I'm glad you're here to relay it. And obviously you'll have a copy of the management letter and all the recommendations and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'll forward it on to our committee. Usually we have a joint meeting scheduled around this time anyway, but I think we did ours early for the budget.
Yeah.
And our next one won't be until closer to town meeting. So it's a year like no other. So,
Right.
No worries at all, Sean.
John, did you have any questions for Jim since you're here tonight?
Yeah, the only question I really had was, if you look at the OPEB liability, which did drop by, say, about 1.3 million. I noticed some of that was changes in assumptions, but the bulk of it was noted as differences between actual and expected. And I didn't know if that was any particular change, or if it was, I know in years past, the liability had been greater because we didn't have a segregated fund, which I believe recently, I think it was at our last ATM, we created the actual fund. So I didn't know if that creation of the actual fund was then allowing prior contributions to our OPEB fund to lower the liability, or if there's some other reason we dropped by about it.
Thanks, John. So with that question specifically, the OPEB trust fund was not reported as its own fund. So that is not the case for this year's financial, that those OPEB trust assets are offsetting the liability. There has to be a formal trust implemented, and there wasn't, it didn't meet the recognition criteria at June 30th,
Right.
2020. So those assets unfortunately didn't count towards the liability, so it wasn't causing that. However, you're correct that in this year, with the favorable experience, those differences in actual and expected experience, there were some trends that were more favorable than originally anticipated. So it's really more that than the trust assets, because the trust assets weren't counted towards it for the year ended fiscal 20.
So would we expect then a future one, since they'll start counting in fiscal 21, at least a reduction for those currently contributed funds?
You got it. So as soon as that trust is adopted, that will offset the total liability really right from the start. And that would also attribute to a better discount rate, depending on how many assets are sitting in that trust. It could allow for a greater discount rate, which would also reduce that liability, because you wouldn't be just using the municipal bond rate. You'd get some credit for the investments and use a rate that's more geared towards that investment mix.
Great.
Good question, John. Anybody else from the Board of Selectmen, comments or questions? I think it's good that we don't have too many comments or questions, because I think we've done a really good job over the last handful of years, really having not much of a management letter. I know Jim has to put something in there, but I think overall we've done really well. And I think the things that are in the management letter are really minor fixes or things that are kind of beyond our control at times. So I really think that, I think it's an A+ for us, and, goes to show that we've got our AAA bond rating, et cetera. And, we're really kind of minding our P's and Q's when it comes to financials. So thanks Jim for doing the audit, and, we appreciate the time, and I think it shows all the effort that the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen and everybody involved at Town Hall does to make everything on the up and up and do what we're supposed to be doing. That's great.
Well, it's my pleasure, Sean, and I'll be happy to participate in any future meetings if so desired. It's our pleasure. So thank you for having me.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Jim.
Thank you.
All right, and I apologize, I skipped over something on the agenda. I was looking at an old copy of the agenda, but we amended our agenda to include a cemetery perpetual care fund appropriation discussion and vote. And I think this is for grub treatment. Is that correct, Joe? About $2,700 and change for grub treatment.
That is correct. Do you want me to pull up the?
Sure. And this is something we've done. We did it last year, and we got to do it again. They did a lot of work out there trying to revamp the bucolic nature of our beautiful cemetery and keep the grass growing before the bugs eat it all, before it even comes up.
So this is the invoice. Tim is on the line if you need him, but this is the invoice for grub treatment. And as you know, cemetery perpetual care funds have to be approved by the Board of Selectmen. We're only allowed to spend a portion of the money that's in the interest that's earned off of the principal. We included in your packets confirmation from the state that you need to take a vote tonight on this from DOR. So this is a continuation of what we started last fall. So.
And is this a one-time for the whole summer, Joe, for the treatment?
I believe so, but if you don't mind asking, double checking with Tim, that might make sure we get the right. That was my understanding. This will be this expenditure for this year.
Yeah, I'm here. It's an annual treatment.
Right. It's they're kind of it's a timing thing with the grubs, right? You got to get them
right.
They're
Right.
growing. Any questions or discussion before we make a motion, or we can make a motion and then have a discussion either or?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So I understand that there's going to be a maintenance program ongoing every year to treat for grubs. And so I was just a little confused about the wording of how the money is being allocated. I know that we have a perpetual fund, and I thought there was about $160,000 in that. And so maybe I just misunderstood the language. It talks about paying it directly from the fund or paying it from the general fund and having it reimbursed to the town. So maybe Joe, you could explain, or Tim, you could explain, because I don't see why it wouldn't just come directly from the fund. It seems like a lot of housekeeping, but maybe I misunderstand. So Joe, maybe you could just explain it.
Sure. Am I still on? Okay. The perpetual care fund is set up through the treasurer's office, and it has to be managed with a bunch of other things. We're only allowed to spend the interest on it. So the actual interest payment has to be made as a payment to the town and accepted as revenue before it can be spent. So we'd spend it out of the cemetery and then replenish it with the transfer from the perpetual care fund interest.
Okay. So am I right that the amount in that fund is about $160,000? I thought that's the number that I heard last fall when we were dealing with this grub issue.
Yeah, I believe that's right. I had asked and I didn't get it. The fund might be even a little bit bigger than that, but we're only allowed to spend the interest in the fund. So I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you, if the 160 relates. I don't believe the 160 relates to the entire fund. I believe it relates to the interest, but we wouldn't want to.
Okay. Right. Okay. And so, so I guess the question is, and it sounds like there is sufficient funding to pay for the yearly maintenance that we have planned. Yes.
Right. Yes.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, I think we'll just have to, since it's the way it is kind of we have to vote on it every time we move any funds for it. So whether it's grub or anything else. So
Yep. Okay.
it may be an annual housekeeping kind of a thing. Till
Tim,
we really get rid of the grubs.
Tim, is this a long-term contract, or is it a quotation for a one-time service?
That was
It's
one time.
just a one-time service for the year.
Why is it a national company? Just curiosity that it's out of Chicago, Illinois. Why is it?
Yeah, they're a large company, but they have a local branch here.
Okay.
So they did the original last year. They did the grub treatment when we restored the cemetery. So they did a good job. They're a competitive price, and we just another annual treatment.
Is there a way to lock them in so we could keep a good price for, say, 5 years or something like that?
We can't do 5. Probably could do 3. But they've been pretty competitive over the last, it seems like they're doing a little larger area this year than previous. So the cost is a little higher, but it's relative to the same price as last year.
Well, I will say that they really did do a very good job in the town. Tim got on that very quickly. A lot of, it's amazing the damage that the grubs can do. And so I have been by there several times, and I always look in it because people have just commented to me, and I think it looks really good. So I'm committed to making sure that we stay on that.
Yep, and it should be even better this year because we hydro-seeded last year, so it does take a little bit to come in, and this spring hopefully it'll be growing in thick and a pleasure to nice grooming cemetery. So.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Anybody want to make a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion that we approve payment, help me if I get confused here, that we approve the payment for grub treatment at the Hamilton Cemetery that occurred in the fall of 2020 for $2,700. What was the exact amount, Joe?
$27.48.
$27.48.
Second.
We're appropriating funds or whatever we're doing. I don't know if we're approving Joe or appropriating, but.
Yeah.
You're appropriating funds.
Appropriating. Okay, we're appropriating funding for payment of the bill for grub treatment at the Hamilton Cemetery in the amount of $2,748.
Second that.
All right. Any further discussion? Okay. Roll call vote. We'll start with Rosie.
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Darcy.
Darcy Dale, aye.
Bill.
William Olson, aye.
Jamie.
Jamie Knudsen, aye.
Myself, Sean Farrell, aye. Thank you, everyone. Sorry about that. I forgot it. And now we're moving on to the Human Rights Commission appointments. Discuss and vote at-large members. And before we get into the discussion of that, Darcy emailed me earlier today about wanting to change some of the language in the human rights. I'm going to call it the document because, for lack of a better word. And it's not on our agenda tonight. So I'll let Darcy speak to it, and then we can decide if we want to take it up or we want to put it on our next agenda, or if we want to put it on our agenda. So Darcy, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it probably should go on the next agenda because we have a full evening. So I would be, happy to wait until the next meeting, if that's okay, and we can discuss the changes at that time.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's have you talk at the end before you make your bi-weekly motion, and I'll ask about new business, and you can kind of give an overview about what you'd like to put on for the next agenda. Okay.
It does. In Darcy, in your opinion, doesn't affect what we do tonight. Doesn't affect the appointments.
No, it shouldn't.
No, I don't think it does.
Right.
All right. All right, so we have a good number of people who've been sitting patiently for an hour here. I appreciate it. We've got a big packet tonight with a whole bunch of wonderful applications. Is there any particular order, or do you want?
Sean, if you can give a summary of exactly the makeup, a quick summary, hopefully someone has of the makeup of the committee or the commission, and then how many people we're trying to pick tonight.
Right. I'm trying to think how many people we have applications from tonight, so we can kind of.
Sean, I should also let you know that earlier, before the meeting started, Frank Chin did come on at the very beginning of the meeting and advise us that he and his son had to unfortunately withdraw their applications. They're planning to move out of town. And he told me that at the beginning before the meeting started. So he wanted me to pass that along. I believe you have a
And we have one more application this afternoon.
Right. So
Joe, can you refresh me so I don't have to go through the whole thing? How many applicants we have?
off the top of my head, I don't know, but I know I have the packet pulled up here to be able to share. So hold on.
I think there are about
think it's 8.
9.
Yeah, I think there were 8 or 9.
No, I thought there were 9. 1, 2, 3, 4.
9 with the new one that was added, I think.
With the new one.
Yeah, including the student, sorry. 8.
Including the student, right?
Yeah. So, Sean, just while we're ramping up for this, one of the in the composition of this, in 2 separate places, I just want to clarify this. So in the composition, A, number 5, non-voting student representative of Hamilton, and then in B, at-large community members, we also have a high school student. So I was perplexed. Now I know that we had 2 high school students, and I was presuming that we would fill perhaps both of those, but I think we should clarify which it's going to be.
The intent, if you go back in the meeting, the intent was to have 1 non-voting student. I think it was the last thing we changed. I think it got unfortunately didn't get edited out in the last version, Rosie. But that was the intent. If you look at the meeting minutes, we talked about 1 student non-voting.
Yeah, I remember we did, but then I went onto our town website and pulled this policy off of it, and it has the student representative listed under A, town government representatives, and B, at-large community members. So it'll be 1 non-voting student representative, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And so, and what we'll do to Darcy, when you talk at the end about new business, we'll clean up that language that wasn't cleaned up, or we'll make sure that we've got the version that we wanted posted there. So, okay. Can you scroll down just a little bit, Joe, so we can look at the makeup, just to Bill's earlier question? So we've got the town government representatives, 9 total voting members, our chief of police or designee, a member of the BOS, designated by us, the director of council on aging, 1 member of the housing authority, designated by the housing authority. And I believe we had Kate McGuire today say Joanne Copeland would be that person. And then we have a non-voting student, and then we have 5 at-large members that we're choosing tonight from, I believe, the 9 applications.
Yeah, I think to clarify, Rosie's, it says that one of them may be a high school student. They don't have to be. So I think the point was we had an 18-year-old.
Right. That was it.
Right. So yeah. So it may be a student. Doesn't have to be a student, but they were not exempted from it if they're a student. So So that was.
If a student wanted to apply, plus the non-voting representative, they could apply.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. That was a clarification. That clarifies it. Yeah.
All right. So is there any way that we want to tackle this tonight? I mean, we've got 9 people. Do you want to, I'm hoping that everyone looked through the applications before the meeting tonight. Yeah. Do you want to, I'm trying to think of the best way to do this since we have so many. I'll take suggestions too, but we could nominate a person or a handful of people. We could kind of go around, or we could go through every person.
I would like to give each person maybe 2 minutes, Sean, let them speak for 2 minutes, and then we can, whoever wants to speak, and then maybe we can talk about it after they speak, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's good. I'd like to hear from the folks that are here. I think that's good. That always gives us some insight. Any other ideas? I think that's good.
I think that's good. I think if we want to since we only have 1 student application, we could deal with Maya and approve her or disapprove her and then let her do her homework or whatever.
I was thinking the same kind of thing, Jamie. So Maya,
let her go to her other meeting that she's missing to be here.
Oh, well, thank you, Maya. Maya, if you want, you can unmute yourself and just introduce yourself to us, and then we can vote on you.
Yeah, thank you for recognizing my time in schoolwork. I'm Maya Beach. I'm a sophomore at the high school, and I've been in this town since 2008. I went through Cutler and then the Miles River Middle School and the high school, and I am looking forward to helping on the Human Rights Commission, considering that you only got one student applicant. And in terms of like the work that I've been doing, I've been helping the Youth Education Committee and the Human Rights Coalition. And I helped run one of the webinars that we did earlier in the year. And I will be leading a subcommittee of the Social Justice Club, which is a school club at the high school.
Great. Thank you, Maya.
Maya, I feel like you've been in front of us before. Have you spoken to the selectmen before in the past couple of years? You sound familiar.
I haven't actually.
Okay. I've heard you speak somewhere before, so thank you for volunteering.
Do we want to kind of cut to the chase here, and anybody want to nominate Maya for?
I'll nominate Maya Beach for the Human Rights Committee for the town of Hamilton as a student representative.
Second by anybody?
Second.
Second by Rosie. Okay. Any discussion? I think she's well qualified. We'll take a roll call vote. We'll start with Rosie.
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Darcy.
Darcy Dale, aye.
Bill.
William Olson, aye.
Jamie.
Jamie Knudsen, aye.
And myself, Sean Farrell, aye. Thank you, Maya. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I'm going to head to my youth education meeting now.
All right. Take care.
Have a nice rest of your night.
Thank you.
All right, so let's, Joe, if you could tell us the first name in our packet, and we'll let them speak.
It's Anne.
Is it Anne? All right, Anne, how are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. How are you all?
We're good.
Good. So my name is Anne Brady. I live on 12 Griffith Road in Hamilton, over near the Cutler School. I have lived here in this house for 21 years. I have raised 2 boys in Hamilton, and it's only recently, honestly, that I really felt like Hamilton is a home to me, however, because of all of the human rights work that has been going on here. Human rights has always been a passion for me. I have a very diverse family. My sister's husband is from Senegal. You might know that I have 2 nieces who are of mixed race, and I have 2 nieces who are adopted from India. And seeing how the world has treated them has always made me feel very passionate about social justice issues. In addition, I've always worked in the area of human rights. My very first job was working with families who did not have access to all the privileges that we tend to have in our town when I was a home visitor in South Boston and Dorchester. And then I had a long career doing research on how to make parenting more accessible for less resourced families. And now I'm a special education teacher. And so I work every day with differently abled students. And it often distresses me to see the way that people think about how those students can access curriculum and how they can be in the world simply because they may have been dealt the hand of having a disability. I have been involved in the Human Rights Coalition since its founding days. I have been involved in the North Shore NAACP since its founding days as well. And I would love to be able to serve the town that's been my home for the past 21 years as part of the Human Rights Commission.
Thank you, Anne.
You're welcome.
I think next on our list is, I think it's Jared Hughes.
Well, you had Joanne Copeland, but she already got appointed by the by the Housing Authority. But then that would be Jared Hughes, yes.
Yeah. Before Jared speaks, Joanne, do you want to say anything since you're kind of already in? But do you want to just introduce yourself to everybody? You're still on mute, Joanne. Sorry. Joe, can you unmute her?
I'll try. Where is she?
Oh,
There.
there she is.
Now,
You're good, Joanne. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'm Joanne Copeland. I live here at Senior Housing on Railroad Ave. Carol Mazzetta and I run the Tenants Association here to try to get people out of their apartments and have some fun and laughs. I've raised 3 children here. I've lived here 48 years. And this is also a passion of mine. I love the new generation that's coming up. I just love them. I think they're great. I think they have it all over our generation. So, yeah, I look forward to doing this.
Great. Thank you, Joanne.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Hughes, are you? Hi, how are you? Go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much for giving me the chance to speak this evening, and thank you to everyone who's been involved so far in working on creating this new initiative for the town. As you mentioned, my name is Jared Hughes. I'm relatively new to town. My wife and I bought our house just over 2 years ago and are coming up on our 2-year anniversary of living in the house tomorrow, actually. So it's been an interesting 2 years considering the pandemic, but it's been a really nice experience getting to know and seeing some of my neighbors on this chat as well this evening. A little bit about myself is that I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I went through the public school system there. One of the things that attracted me to Hamilton was that there's a strong record of public schools in this town. That said, one of my concerns was sort of a lack of diversity moving out of the city, and to come into this community and see this sort of initiative happening is really, really something that I appreciate. And so even if I'm not involved on this commission, to know that it's something that is important to my fellow townsfolk is really great, and makes me feel like I'm going to be able to be at home here for many years to come. And hopefully at some point look back on 48 years in Hamilton. I went into college as part of the Posse Foundation scholarship program. It was a merit-based scholarship that sends cohorts of students from cities from around the nation as a support system for these cohorts, for us to work together to make sure that everyone gets through college. When you go into an exotic to you environment, at times it can be daunting being on your own and without your family support system. One of the things that we also did throughout college was facilitate annual weekend retreats based on issues around the campus, as well as through experiences that Posse scholars had around the nation. We would decide on issues that we wanted to address and then focus retreats to create safe spaces for dialogues on different matters of diversity and inclusion that were affecting us across the country. This was a really important experience for me, both in the sense of being collaborative and opening avenues for communication around issues that anyone could be experiencing and may feel alone in or feel unable to speak out about due to general circumstances that they experienced. After college, I've been working at Harvard University, and I work with a really, really broad set of people doing lab administration work. And so that's just always a constant thing for me, is to be mindful of the need for open communication with people coming from all sorts of backgrounds. So this is something that I would hope to be able to bring to this commission and to encourage these types of open settings for safe communication and dialogue. As well, I have spent a lot of time in the culinary arts, and so I do outreach work, working with a nonprofit for the past 5 years, doing monthly meals open to the public that strive to recognize the dignity of any person and the need for them to be able to have secure food sources. So that's something I spoke to in my application, but I hope this gives you a little bit more context for where I'm coming from. And I look forward to speaking with all of you further, no matter the outcome this evening. So thank you very much for the time, and I'll stop there.
Thanks, Jared.
Awesome. Thank you, Jared. Up next, we have Katie Knudsen.
Hi, thanks. I am excited to apply for the Human Rights Commission. I think I have a lot in common already with the folks who've spoken. I've lived in Hamilton for 25 years on Elliott Street. Never thought we'd be here this long, but this is our home. I've had a long-time interest in human rights since my college days, starting to take classes where I was really awakened to sort of differing experiences and the privilege that I'd been raised in that I hadn't really recognized. And I'm going to apologize for my phone ringing. I'm not quite sure how to stop that. Right? We're one of the minority in Hamilton that still have a home phone line. Oh, this is good. My husband has left the screen because he's going to try to make the phone stop ringing.
We have the same situation in our house, Katie. We have a land.
You know, we kept it so we wouldn't get all the spam calls on our cell phones, but now it's the Red Cross. We're blood donors. Sorry. I apologize. I'm really hoping this stops soon. Okay, well, I'll try to talk over it. I worked in dual diagnosis, was my first job after my master's. So I worked with folks with mental health diagnoses and addiction issues. I've worked as an adjunct professor and in student development, but probably most importantly, I'm a trained therapist. So I listen all day to people's stories, and I really believe that's how we grow empathy and understanding, is just hearing from others. It's definitely how I've grown those interests. I'm a parent. We've raised 4 kids here in Hamilton, 2 of whom are Black, 2 of whom identify as LGBT, 2 of whom have diagnosed learning disabilities. So I'm well familiar with what it's like to grow up in Hamilton and be a little different than the norm. And, you know, we've had really positive experiences in town, and our kids have. We've also had some negative experiences. And at times, like Mandy talked about in the forum the other day, just didn't really know where to go when the experiences weren't so good. So I'm really excited about the formation of this commission. I'm also a public school employee, not in Hamilton, but I think that gives me a pretty important window, and too, I'm sure, into, you know, how students on the margins often are left out of discussion, often are pushed to the side. And it's really often not through ill intent. It's just a lack of education, a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding. So I think I bring all those things to the table, and I do apologize for my phone.
Thank you, Katie. All right, and then we had, sorry, scrolling through my things here. We had Carol Mazzetta up next. Carol, are you here? Maybe we'll come back to Carol. Nancy Steffes. Is Nancy here?
Hello.
Hi,
Yes. Hi. I want to thank you for pronouncing my name so well. You did it better than I do.
Oh, thank you.
I think this is a great crop of people that you have to choose from. I'm very excited about that. I work for the state. I'm the senior manager of the Health Connector Appeals Unit. And what I would bring to the table as a member of the commission would be my skills in informal dispute resolution, and I would want to focus on communication and reconciliation, and also act as a resource for people that were looking for some assistance. My husband and I have raised 4 kids in town, and for volunteer work, one of the really most life-changing things I got involved in was settling a refugee family from Afghanistan with First Church in Wenham. I'm a bureaucrat, so I handle all the paperwork for people. We had a great group of people that handled medical issues, finding furniture, clothing, and all of that. We all just organized ourselves, and I'm happy to say that those children are now grown and my Facebook friends. So I hope I can be of service to the group.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Joe, I don't have or Jamie or anybody else.
Elena and Christina.
Is Elena? Hi, Elena.
Hi, I'm Elena. Hi, thank you for having me. I grew up in Beverly and was an active participant in the Beverly Human Rights Committee. So when we moved to Hamilton, I was really interested to see something similar. I'm so happy that it was organized so quickly. As a queer person with many queer friends, we spend a lot of our time with like at North Shore Pride events, and when we lived in Beverly, we'd go to all the flag raisings and events similar to that. So if I was to join, I'd love to be a part of organize those type of events in Hamilton, having safe places or safe events for different families and people to come and feel a part of the community. I am a special education teacher in Beverly, and I'm also a behavior analyst for a company that serves children and teenagers with autism. So by default, I'm a little bit of an autism advocate as well. So if I were to be a part of this committee, I'd be interested in helping with LGBTQ events. I'd love to organize things for people with disabilities or even awareness. And I'm currently trying to organize a professional goal for our school for the teachers to plan more of an to create an anti-racism plan for our curriculum. And that would be something similar I would love to be involved with in Hamilton, whether it be that or Black Lives Matter events. So I'm really invested in providing opportunities for the kids. In my family alone, we've encountered a lot of pushback in terms of being like just presenting as gender bender family, or, just being able to like express to my kids that they can be who they want to be. Even like something as simple as that has been something pretty hard to push back on. So I'd love to help with that in the community. And as someone who is queer and considered neurodivergent, I have my self-interest in mind as well. So I appreciate your time, and I'd love to help, even if it's not on the board. I'm excited to be involved.
Great, thank you. And I think maybe we just have one more, Christina Holtz. Is there anyone else that was?
We have to get back to Carol.
Carol is back on. Carol is back on. And
Carol, are you on?
I can see her, Sean, but she's trying to unmute, I think.
Oh, there she is.
Hello?
Hi, Carol. We can hear you now.
Oh, good. Boy, oh boy, all those people, I have to follow all of them.
Well, there's one
Holy
more to go, so
mackerel.
you're not last. So
Wow. All I am is 80 years old. My God, I don't have half the credentials those people have. All I can say is we sold our home almost 4 years ago now. It was a home I grew up in, and we raised our 3 children there. Our oldest boy just retired from the railroad. Our other boy is going to be retiring shortly from the town. He'll have almost 40 years in with the town of Hamilton. And our daughter will be close behind. And the only thing I have to say is, after listening to all those people, and holy mackerel, it's awfully hard to follow all the credentials that they have. And the only thing I could say is that, I'm very open to all of their suggestions. Ann Brady, I know her from my old neighborhood. That's where we left. And I had the opportunity to watch her boys grow up. Very nice boys, by the way. And hopefully maybe I can add some common sense, which I think this country has sorely missed for a while. And I don't know about you people, but we grew up with a lot of common sense. And I'm just willing to listen. I just listening to these people tonight, I learned a lot. And I always thought I lived in the perfect town. But last time we were on listening to Mandy, that really got me. I was very surprised because I've known Mandy since she was a young girl. And to hear that she got a hard time in high school bothered the heck out of me, because my kids went to the regional and I had grandchildren go there, and great-grandchildren are going to be going there. So that really bothered me. And it's amazing how cruel people can be. And I don't like that at all. But I'm willing to learn, folks. I've got some educated people here, you know, and I just went to the old high school here in town where the library is. We had 22 in our graduating class. So we all knew one another, and I just, I'm looking forward to it. And that's it.
All right. Thanks, Carol.
Okay.
And then last but not least, we have Christina Holtz.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Holtz. We have lived in Hamilton since 2015. And prior to that, we lived in Danvers for 15 years. And prior to that, we lived in Marblehead and Gloucester. So I've been on the North Shore for a while in a couple of different towns. I'm currently at home, but did have a career in predominantly software. And, you know, my time in corporate America, I was able to see a lot of inequities of power and access to jobs, promotions, and just the way people were treated. Since 2018, I've been involved on the steering committee of the Hamilton-Wenham chapter of the League of Women Voters. And I've worked primarily on voter services. I've worked at many voter registration drives and have become very passionate about that issue and how it affects almost every aspect of our society. I also, a couple of years ago, had the great privilege to take a civil rights pilgrimage trip through the South. And my eyes were opened to just some really incredible history and inequities that I don't know are always totally understood by all of society, particularly white Americans. I wanted to get involved with the committee after being loosely involved on the Facebook page and effort and the beginning of the NAACP chapter. After attending the community conversation, I was saddened by some of the comments that I heard. And I thought that I would apply to be part of the new effort to heighten awareness of these issues in the town of Hamilton. But there's some great applicants, and I'm very excited that the town has is going to be moving forward with this committee.
Thank you, Christina, very much. All right, so I think that's everybody. So just some kind of, I guess, next steps here. So we have Joanne, who's already on for the committee, and we voted in Maya for our student rep. So we have 5 more positions. And we have, and anybody remind me if I've forgotten anybody, we have Nancy Steffes, Elena Walsh, Ann Brady, Jared Hughes, Christina Holtz, and Carol Mazzetta. And we're picking 5 from those, I think 6. Is that right?
So, yeah, so Sean, so I had two comments, 2 questions, and we can sort of maybe make a decision. But one, wow, impressive. I feel, lucky that we had unbelievable applicants here. So really, really feeling good about this. Number 2, length. Do they get appointed for different lengths, Sean? And
Yeah.
how do you identify that?
And Joe can speak to that. There's different terms because we want to stagger the terms. So not the whole board is rolling off at one time. Joe, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's actually in the policy. Two of the positions will be for 2 years. For 3 years, 2 positions will be for 2 years, and 1 position will be for 1 year. And that way, there you'll create every year you'll have at least 1 position come up to be renewed. Most years it'll be 2. So if it's right here in the policy, as you can see in term, the members who are town government representatives shall be appointed by the 5 members who are residents of the town shall be appointed initially as follows, and thereafter for terms of 3 years. 2 members for a 3-year term, 2 members for a 2-year term, and 1 member for a 1-year term.
So in history, will tell you that it doesn't mean you're not on the committee again. It just means you got to be reappointed, which would not be atypical. So I guess the first thing, Sean, we should just ask if anybody who's applying has a preference before we vote them into a position they don't want to be into. So I'm not sure if anyone wants to speak. Anybody interested in a 1 or 2 year term should probably speak up.
I'd be interested in just the 1 year.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we heard you, Carol.
Okay. Being 80 years old, I don't want to go for any more.
There's no guarantees, right?
Okay.
And I'm assuming everybody who's in it doesn't care whether they're 1 or 2 or 3 years, but anybody specifically who wanted a specific role. But I'm going to assume everybody is, doesn't matter to them because they can just reapply again the following year.
And so, and we can do this. I know the school committee does it away, and it might work for us, but we can always decide differently. Each person on the board will give their top. In this case, we're appointing 5, so we'd give our top 5, and then kind of we'll go through and I can tally votes as people say people. And then we could even go with whoever gets the most votes could be the 3-year term or and kind of so on and so forth down if we want to do it that way, unless somebody's got a different suggestion.
No, I was going to say everybody should give you their top 5, then you can do the tally and then we can vote on the ones that aren't unanimous.
Okay. And before we get into the discussion and in the voting, to Bill kind of started to say it, but and I don't know if I've said it before, but just thank you all for applying and willing to step up and do your civic duty and become a member of a committee for the town. It is a big commitment, as all of us know on the Board of Selectmen, and we really do appreciate the time you've taken to do the application, and we're looking forward to working with those of you that get chosen for the committee and being a proactive force in our town.
And it doesn't eliminate anybody else. I mean, the meetings should be attended by everybody. So just because not on the board does not
right.
mean.
If you don't get picked tonight, it doesn't mean that you can't be a part of something. So please, please stay involved, even if you don't get picked today. Any other discussion from the board, or we want to give our kind of top 5 and round robin here?
All right.
Anybody want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first.
Okay.
Once again, unbelievable group of people. I feel lucky to be part of you. I mean, I'm a minority. I think that the gentleman spoke to it at the coalition about being a silent minority. So people don't know. Sometimes don't know who you are based on what you look like, but you still, I'm Jewish in this community, which is not a lot of Jews. So it's good that we're having a community of people who can speak out and speak freely and share their thoughts and not feel like they're going to be judged. So I welcome this activity, and then I think, Sean, we're going to pick who represents selectmen and other things. So I think we should get to that tonight too. But my top 5 that I just picked, once again, nobody's not worthy of being it, but because I had to pick 5, I picked Ann, Nancy, Elena, Jared, and Catherine, or Katie.
Okay. And I apologize. I realized that I forgot to write Katie's name down when I mentioned names before. So thank you, Bill, for saying her name. All right. Anybody want to go next? Anybody still tallying? Jamie?
I will go next. actually, yeah, I'll go next. And thanks, everybody. I won't prolong, but ditto those comments. So yeah, so Ann Brady,
Okay.
Walsh, Jared Hughes, Nancy Steffest, and Katie Knudsen.
Okay. Rosie or Darcy, either of you ready yet? You're still tallying?
I can go. That's fine with me.
Sure.
So one of the things we had talked about was getting a very broad town representation. And I know a lot of these people tonight are involved in the Hamilton Wenham Coalition. And my choices were based on wanting to get a really broad citizen participation. I think one of the problems that I see in having coalition and commission members be one and the same is that strategies of the coalition might be somewhat different than the towns. They have a lot more freedom to do things. And I would not want to see actions be confused, one versus representing the other. So it is, I certainly admire all of the candidates and thank you very much. But I will choose Jared, Elena, Carol, and Christina Holtz.
You get one more?
One more.
Yeah, I may be wrong, but I think the others are members of the coalition and
You can stick with the 4 if you want.
yeah.
Okay.
And so that's my reasoning, that I really want to see broad representation throughout the town.
Okay. Darcy, you ready?
Yes, yeah, and
Okay.
I'm actually going to mirror what Rosie said because I don't think there should be any crossover from the coalition, which is a completely different group, and they are politically motivated, which is fine, but we really don't want the town to be politicized. So I am going to go with the 4 that are not affiliated. It would be Jared, Elena, Carol, and Christina.
Okay. And then I guess it's up to me to finish it out. I would say Nancy, Anne, Christina, and Nancy. Did I say Jared?
No, I don't think.
Jared. There we go. All right. So tallying it up, we have Jared was our top vote getter. Second place in votes was Elena. And then we have a tie between Nancy, Ann, and Christina, which gives us, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. That gives us 5. So we have, as far as votes go, that get us across the finish line here for the top 5. We have Nancy Steffest, Elena Walsh, Ann Brady, Jared Hughes, and Christina Holtz. So that is our committee.
What about Sean? Who gets the 3 years and 2 years and 1 year terms?
Refresh my memory. How many 3-year terms are there?
2.
2. So that would be Jared and Elena. And then all the rest are tied for kind of second place, I guess. They each had 3 votes.
So we just have to decide out of those 3 who gets the 1-year term.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if they want to, one of them want to volunteer for 1 year term.
I don't want to rock, scissors, paper.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to take the 1-year term.
Okay. So Christina, take the 1-year term and then.
And you can return. I mean, it doesn't limit you to 1 year.
Yeah, so. We're not going to kick you out in the first year here. We'll most likely reappoint you.
It just means they'll see you back in next year.
Yeah, you'll have to talk to us again. All right, so then,
I
does
didn't
anybody
hear
want,
folks, Jan.
does anybody want to make a motion to approve those 5 folks that we just got?
I make a motion that we approve the people that were just listed as the HRC to represent the citizens of Hamilton.
A second by anybody?
A second, do we want to name them or we're fine? So I second.
All right, and then just to name them all, the 5 people for the human rights that we're voting on right now are Nancy Steffest, Elena Walsh, Ann Brady, Jared Hughes, and Christina Holtz. And so all those in favor, we'll start with Darcy.
Darcy Dale, aye.
Bill,
William Olson, aye.
Rosie,
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Jamie,
Amy Knudsen, aye.
and myself, Sean Farrell, aye. Awesome, and thank you, Carol, and thank you, Katie, for.
Well, good luck,
Yeah.
everybody.
And Carol,
Good luck,
stay involved,
everyone.
please. And Katie, I know you will.
Thank you.
All right, so now do we want to discuss our membership? Does anybody want to lobby?
Joe,
for
can you go
membership?
up? Joe, can you go to put up the at-large members again, or not the at-large, but the community member? Just that sheet, so we can make sure we
Oh, the breakdown, yeah.
get everything covered today, so they can start being productive with the committee.
So we've got Chief Stevens, one of our board, Director of Council on Aging, Joanne from the Housing Authority, and then our student Maya Beach.
Okay.
So really, it's just us tonight, and then we'll have a full membership.
Like I said, John, I would throw myself into the ring. From my background, my growing up, I feel like it'd be a good asset to the group of what I've done through my upbringing and values. And so, anybody else? I mean, and once again, I'd support other people if they wanted to be, but I'm throwing myself in the ring if other people are not interested in being part of the commission.
All right.
Can
Joe,
we ask him? Can we ask him questions?
Yeah, why not? Joe, can you unshare? Can you unshare? Perfect. Anybody else want to throw their hat in the ring?
I do.
I knew it. All right, so we've got Jamie and Bill. Anybody else interested?
May I make a motion?
Well, I'm gonna. If Jamie's interested, I'm gonna withdraw myself. So I think Jamie would be great. And so I'm gonna withdraw my name, and I will support Jamie.
All right. Does anybody want to make a motion for Jamie then?
I'll move that we vote for Jamie as the BOS member of the HRC.
Okay. Anybody second that?
I second that.
All right. Any discussion, Jamie? Do you want to say anything?
No, not a whole lot. I mean, it's something that I've put a lot of my life into, and very, very important. Looking forward to really promoting good dialogue and education, and working with the great folks that have been a part of it. I think you would have been, well, you would have been better to have Katie than me, although I guess we weren't competing for one another.
She can write all your speeches.
And yeah, it's not about speeches. She's about action. So
That's good. I like that.
But so at least I have her as a partner, I guess. So, but yeah, she's put her life on the line for people when it's been at great cost to herself for human rights. So sad to see her not on there, but I will. I'll gladly carry the banner for her.
All right. All those in favor, I'll do a roll call vote. Rosie?
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Darcy?
Darcy Dale, aye.
Bill?
William Olson, aye.
Myself, Sean Farrell, aye. Jamie?
Jamie Knudsen, aye.
All right, the ayes have it.
Thank you, Jamie.
We've got a fully seated committee. That's great. Now, Joe, do you have any, what's the next step in the process for these folks? They have to get sworn in.
Yeah, they have to get sworn into the town clerk's office. They can come down. I'll notify Corinne tomorrow that the different people in the different terms and come down and be sworn in as members. And then I am an ex officio member, so I can call the first meeting and let these folks organize themselves and select who's going to be the chair, et cetera, et cetera. So once we have everybody sworn in, I'll work with primarily Jamie and Russ, for instance, and Joanne Copeland to try and come up with a date and a time that we could have a meeting that will allow good participation. So
great. All right. Up next, we have the Waste Reduction Committee discuss and vote on committee status. And we have Tom McEnany here tonight too to help us through the discussion, and Joe as well. We have a Waste Reduction Committee who doesn't really want to be a committee anymore. We have some appointed, reappointed members and some that haven't been. So we're going to kind of discuss their status and next steps. Joe, do you want to cue anything up that I might have missed?
no, I mean, I think you kind of highlighted the heavy part. We had some discrepancy with when members were appointed. We had some members that were reappointed in 2019. This year, there was, you reappointed late. I don't think you took up the reappointments until October, and we had some in August, we had some correspondence from members of the Waste Reduction Committee saying that the committee didn't want to be committed anymore. So rather than put anybody forward, we thought we'd wait until a more full conversation could happen. According, Tom can answer some of your questions if you have any, but according to Tom, it's kind of customary if somebody doesn't get reappointed, that position can be held over, the person can hold over in that position until a reappointment is made. So the committee could continue to operate as a committee as long as they had a quorum of people showing up at their meetings. The real question is, this was a committee that was established by the Board of Selectmen. If the members that are currently serving don't want to be on there, that's fine, well and good. It's certainly their prerogative and their right. But the board should make a determination if it wants to keep the committee going or if it wants to appoint new people, or that's your conversation to have. So, Tom, what did I miss?
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, members of the board. So essentially, as I understand it, that this committee was created by vote of the Board of Selectmen in 2008 is what I was told by Joe. So it's a town committee created by the board. It's subject to the open meeting law, would be subject to appointment, obviously, by the Board of Selectmen as the appointing authority. So the committee itself can't just decide on its own that they no longer wish to be a town committee. It would really be up to the Board of Selectmen to make that determination. So you have really kind of two options. Option one would be to appoint people to the committee if you wish to do so. Anybody who's on the committee at present who had been appointed, and if their appointment has expired and they continued to serve in that office, they generally would continue to serve in a holdover status until somebody else is appointed and qualified to that seat. So they would essentially remain on the committee until the board decided to replace them with somebody else or reappoint them if they chose to, if the board chooses to do that. The other option that the board has, of course, would be to dissolve the committee if it wished to do so, if it felt that there was no longer a need for this particular committee, or you wanted to reconstitute it as some other type of committee, you could certainly do that. That's obviously well within the board's prerogative. But the committee itself can't just decide that it doesn't wish to be a town committee anymore. It's really up to the Board of Selectmen to make that determination.
So, comments, questions, insight, suggestions?
So we've confirmed that all the other members of that recycling committee have, as I understand, they're not interested in being reappointed? Is that confirmed, or is that just informal discussion?
We had correspondence from the chair and another member of the Waste Reduction Committee. I sent out emails to all of the members and got no return emails back responding to our request of did they want to be on or not. So what we've been told so far is that by two members, that the rest of the committee did not want to be a committee. And when I asked the individual members to confirm that, I didn't get any answer back. So.
I mean, I think it's important that we have the committee. I mean, I think if they want to be private citizens and help from that angle, they can, but they're obviously wouldn't be part of the, I mean, we welcome what they've done in their insight, but I think we need to have a town committee, especially seeing as though we're doing some pretty significant things with it. So yeah, I think we need to open it up and keep it going and appoint new members.
I guess I would say that the work that they've done is invaluable. I understand that some members don't want to continue in an official capacity. I would urge them to think about changing their minds. I understand that other things are taking precedence now, and for some members who can't stay, I do understand, but your work has been just invaluable in helping the town understand ways to reduce waste and do it in as fair a way as possible. So I certainly would want the committee to stay in existence, and I would hope that the current members would think about it some more and decide whether they want to stay on as well. And I see in Giroux here, I don't know if she had any comments.
My only comment is that in 2019, it was our understanding that none of us were reappointed as members, and certainly none of us went to town hall and were sworn in. So we were actually told by the then existing, I believe it was an acting town clerk, that we couldn't host our meetings because we weren't an official town committee. So I don't think that we've thought that we were acting inappropriately. We thought we were acting appropriately in no longer continuing as a town committee. So I just want to clarify that we actually believe since 2019 we were not officially elected or qualified. That's all I have to say.
Are any of the members interested in continuing? Do you know, Anne?
I think when people were last polled, which was maybe a month or more ago, people were not interested. I think they preferred to be simply what we would call a citizens advocacy group. And I believe that in the letter that we wrote you, for most of the time, this group has been an informal group. I think there's been only 2 or 3 years that it has been a formal town committee. And I think a lot was accomplished just as an informal citizens group. And for a number of reasons, I think that's how people wanted to go forward. It's not that people aren't interested in reporting to the Board of Selectmen. People are interested in tracking the tonnages to see how well this new composting initiative is going to work. But I think people felt like it was more flexible and more efficient at times when we were not a town committee.
Yeah, I think that there's unfortunately was a misunderstanding, miscommunication. I don't think anybody did anything wrong. I think that, but now we have to clean it up. So I think it's important. You guys have proven it's important, and we need to keep it going, and we need to do it the right way. So unfortunately, I don't think that allows us to do it as an informal committee. So I mean, hopefully we can get some interest and get some people to join, because I think it is like Brody says, what you guys have done is invaluable, and I think we want to keep it. We want to make it more formal because it's important. So, so I'm not sure what the next steps would be, Sean or Joe, to sort of.
So I mean, I guess that we have a couple choices. One choice is we reappoint the committee, ask for applications. Another option is dissolve the committee. And a third option is kind of a combination of the two a little bit, that we would dissolve the committee and reconfigure the committee to include maybe some other aspects besides just waste reduction. maybe it could be more of an environmental committee that deals with our MVP grant or other things, with our storm preparedness, et cetera. There are some things that we do every once in a while for kind of future environmental impact and not just waste reduction. You know, maybe it's a whole new committee with a different, broader scope for environmentalism. You know, any thoughts would be welcome.
I kind of like the idea. I don't know how the waste reduction committee would feel about this, but my thought is, I know that Ian, you and I have had some conversations about the MVP, and I would certainly like to see a broadening of your skills and your interests, if that's something that, even if you opted to do it on an informal basis. I mean, I don't know how that would work with the town, though, because we would be looking for the group for advice, much as we did with the waste reduction committee. And I don't know, if they opted to be an informal group and maybe expand the scope of what they're advising us on, can they be an informal group, and can we take their advice at all? Tom, you look like you're thinking about that.
Sure. So in my opinion, they can't be a formal group that's appointed by the Board of Selectmen. So the Board of Selectmen wants to have a waste reduction committee, environmental committee, or some other committee that kind of fills that role, then the board would appoint people to serve in that capacity to formally advise the board at periodic times during the course of the year on those particular issues. Obviously, you know, any citizen can come to a Board of Selectmen meeting and could give input or ask to be added to the agenda on a particular issue. So certainly you could hear from particular citizens or who have an interest in this issue, and they could have been obviously former members of this committee, but you couldn't create a board appointed informal committee that would essentially kind of, you know, operate outside of the normal strictures of the open meeting law and other laws that would apply, conflict of interest laws, public records laws, things like that, that would apply to any town board or committee. I would also say that, you know, if you have members of this, if the committee continued to exist, and you have these folks who are members and remain either who are appointed and remain kind of in the holdover status, to the extent that they're meeting and talking about waste reduction efforts, and then with the intent of bringing that back to the Board of Selectmen in some form of a report or update, I think that you could run the risk that that would be considered an open meeting law violation, albeit I believe it would be an unintentional, given, you know, as I understand, the committee felt that they hadn't been reappointed and therefore were not, you know, still an official kind of town committee. But I think that you could certainly run the risk of, you know, if it's allowed to essentially continue, that it would run the risk that there would be the possible open meeting law violations that would occur if this group continued to meet, even if they thought they were just meeting on an informal basis and discussing this issue, which is the purpose for which they were appointed.
So Sean, I'm fine with, you had made a suggestion about sort of retooling the committee. I think that's fine. I'm not sure whichever is easier, whether we just modify and add to their roles, responsibility versus just sort of, you know, versus sort of end it and start. I think it's probably easier to modify than it is to end and start. But
yeah, well, we modified in the past and kept the same membership. You know, if I'm correct, I think we went from what was it called previously, before we were the waste reduction group, and what
I don't remember. Heather may remember. She's on the top.
Committee?
The recycling committee, yes.
Recycling committee, that was it. Right, and then we wanted to expand the scope, so we changed it to waste reduction because it wasn't just about recycling anymore. it was a broader thing. So we could rename and re-mission statement, basically.
So, yeah, so Sean, my opinion is that since this is not as easy as just reappointing the people tonight, and we're going to retool this thing, I think we need to spend some more time on it. So,
yeah, I think so.
Find a sponsor for the committee and somebody who's really to sort of take ownership in it and help us put it back together. I think I think it is invaluable, and I think we need to do this. So, yeah, so I'm all in favor of retooling it. And I think that, you know, if the people are willing to if the members really get reappointed, we'd unanimously reappoint them all right now because they're valuable members. If they're not interested in it, I totally get it. But I think we need to take some time, in my opinion, to retool it and then bring it back maybe at a future meeting.
I think we're going to need these people for a lot of things. I think we're going to find there are so many things that are going to play into this. We don't even know it yet. So yeah, I'm with Bill. I think we need to retool and just keep going and take our time and do it right.
Well, I'm happy to talk to people about what it may mean to retool the committee. I'm happy to talk to the other members. I think I would be interested talking to one or more of the Board of Selectmen about what we thought some of the problems were and what didn't work well and what was particularly frustrating for us.
And is there something we can do? Is there something we can do?
Maybe it works both ways in terms of retooling.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
Sounds
Right.
good.
So I guess one follow-up question for Tom is we still, even though they're, and I think there's some discrepancy with the appointments. We have some that have been reappointed because they're a 3-year term, but then others, it was a gray area because of our previous town clerk's record keeping. So it's still a standing committee. So, and this is kind of to Ann as well, that if you guys meet, even though you don't, you'll be violating OML.
But that was my suggestion, Mr. Chairman, was going to be to suggest that if I would caution against having any discussions outside of a properly posted meeting, I would suggest that the meeting be posted for the purposes of discussing whether or not you wish to remain a committee, and if so, whether you want to see it retooled and some of the things that you think would be helpful in that retooling process. But I think that any discussions that are held outside of a posted meeting by a quorum of the members of this committee would potentially be a violation of the open meeting law. And that would include serial communications as well. So we're kind of hitting on some of the topics that are
Tom, we don't have, I don't want to get too much in detail, but according to our records, we don't have a committee right now. So
that's what I was going to ask, is I don't even know who on the committee is still on the committee. So that's not clear to the committee members, to my knowledge. Maybe you can, Ann.
And we also asked for a copy of that 2019 vote. We didn't think anyone had been reappointed. We asked for it. No one was able to produce that for us. I went to town hall. Heather went to town hall several times. So as far as the committee is concerned, there is no committee because none of us have been reappointed.
That was our understanding.
And if you're saying that we were just holdovers, we were never qualified, we never went and were sworn in.
Right. Well, so you wouldn't necessarily be sworn in as a holdover. When you originally take office, you get sworn in. And then if your term expires and if you're not reappointed or someone else is not reappointed and sworn in to fill your position, then technically from a legal perspective, you continue in that position until someone is either you're reappointed to fill that seat or somebody else is appointed to fill that seat and sworn in. So
would it also qualify it? Let's say, I mean, in this instance, let's kind of put Ann in the hot seat here. If Ann wasn't reappointed and you're saying she's kind of still in that role, even though she wasn't reappointed,
or officially resign.
Or officially resign. So she would have to resign from the
letter and resign. I mean,
that's correct. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I'm assuming that for purposes of our discussion here, that no one has formally resigned their position. But, you know, obviously, if somebody doesn't wish to serve, then they can send a letter to the town clerk's office resigning their position, or send it to the town manager's office, and then that would be filed with the town clerk, and then that would obviously trigger a vacancy in that position, which the Board of Selectmen could then vote to fill.
You know, it was a confusing time. If you remember, at that point, there was talk of having a 3-person oversight group to come in and sort of monitor what we were doing. So at that point, it was confusing as to who was on the committee and who wasn't. And so when we went in to try to find out if we were still on the committee, it was very confusing. So I think we've all just assumed, and that's how we've been acting, that we were no longer on the committee. So I'm confused by this a bit.
And in fact, as I said earlier, the clerk's office refused to post meetings for us and said, no, you're not a committee anymore, so I'm not going to post meetings for you.
Right.
Right.
But,
Yeah, no, I know you said that, and I can't really explain that, why that would have been the case. But in any event, I think that legally, from a legal perspective, technically, it's still a town board, it's still a town committee appointed by the Board of Selectmen, and anybody who was appointed to that committee who hasn't resigned would essentially remain as a either appointed member or in a holdover status as an appointed member.
So,
And if you don't want to serve on the committee, you certainly, the board can't compel you to do so. If you wish to resign, you certainly can, but until.
So can I
Yep.
interrupt you for a second, Tom? Might I make a suggestion here just to kind of move things along? Because I feel we're in this cycle here. Anne and Heather, and I think there's another person on here so that's on that or not on the committee is what we're debating. Maybe it seems like the status is, and from our conversations over the summer up until now, or still that you would rather just be a citizens advisory group. Would you please maybe help us by having a conversation individually with those folks in your group and encourage them to turn in a letter of resignation to the town manager, myself, and then we can kind of go from there. That way we're not worrying about any open meeting law violations, and then we can redo the group and then ask you guys to give some input and reapply if you'd like to, if we kind of change the scope of the group.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I was going to suggest that it might make it easier if the board's intent is to reconstitute this committee and perhaps expand the role and duties of this committee beyond just this waste management.
Dissolve it.
To maybe dissolve it. And that would give the folks here who are currently on the committee the opportunity to kind of meet and discuss this issue without having to worry about the potential for open meeting law compliance. And hopefully some of these folks would be willing to come back and certainly talk to you and or other members of the board to discuss what the new committee would look like.
It might be just cleaner for us to dissolve it. That way you guys don't have to go through all that talking to each other and resigning and et cetera. Go ahead, Ann, you had something to say.
Yeah, I have a question for Tom. It was my understanding that if we just talk about the scope of our responsibilities, what we should be doing or not doing, that isn't a violation of the open meeting law. That isn't a deliberation on what's under our jurisdiction. So I was thinking that just calling around, having a meeting or two about whether we want to be a committee, and if so, what we want the scope of that to be. I did not think that would violate open meeting law. Is that your view or not?
I think that's a pretty gray area. Typically speaking, communications between committee members can take place in really kind of two limited areas. One is for purposes of scheduling a meeting. You can have discussions outside of a properly posted meeting to decide, hey, can we meet on next Wednesday, or are you available next Tuesday for a meeting? So things like that, scheduling issues. The second is typically to convey documents and other things that are going to be agendas and things like that are going to be discussed in an open meeting, as long as there's no deliberation or discussion about any opinions or the contents of those documents. So if, for example, the committee is going to discuss a particular document that was prepared, some waste management report or something like that, then the chair can email that to the other committee members without violating the open meeting law, provided that there's no discussion about the contents or any kind of opinion that the member may have about the particular report. So when you start getting outside of those kind of areas where it's just really conveying information that ultimately is going to either be discussed in an open meeting or for the purposes of scheduling a meeting, then you run the risk that the Attorney General's office will find a violation.
So Sean, we have I think we have two choices, right? So, well, three really. They all officially resign, which I think is just too much paperwork for them to do. One is dissolve the committee. Three is, can we just make a motion to let them? Can't we just make a motion that we accept their resignation? Accept the resignation.
We don't have everybody here, so
Okay.
I think maybe the best course of action is to dissolve the committee tonight.
Okay.
That's kind of where I'm leaning, and then we amongst ourselves and meet with some of those members to see if they have any suggestions on scope or if they're interested in doing something a little bit differently. I'd welcome the conversation, but I think we kind of have to move forward and
Shall I
leave the past in the past, I guess.
Shall I make a motion?
Sure.
I move that we dissolve the Waste Reduction Committee with the knowledge that we will be considering a retooling in the near future.
A second by
Second.
anybody? Okay.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I just want to make sure, Sean, we say dissolve, it doesn't create more hard effort to get it to, we can, to dissolve it and to have it reinstated. Is that just one meeting, one vote? Or do we have to have like 3 meetings to reinstate a?
I don't
No,
think
yeah,
we
no,
can
that
go
would
back
just
next
be,
meeting and reform it if
Right.
we want to.
Okay, all right.
Right.
That's fine. I just want, I didn't know dissolving sounds so permanent, but it's more, put on hold, but.
We're not erasing it.
Yeah, all right. So yeah, but the advice here is that, and next week, in the meeting in 2 weeks, we could reinstate it. If we were successful, then that's fine. I will support this motion.
Okay. Then a roll call vote. We'll start with Rosie.
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Jamie,
Jamie Knudsen, aye.
Darcy,
Darcy Dale, aye.
Bill,
William Olson, aye.
and myself, aye. All right, the ayes have it. The motion carries. Thanks, Ann and Heather, for joining us, and hopefully we'll talk to one or both.
You can now go meet without anybody holding over you. So please meet and please come back to us. So thank you.
That was a surprise tonight, so thanks for clarifying.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
All right. Up next on our agenda, we have ATM warrant information, discussion of articles, and vote to close the warrant. Joe, can you bring up the?
Bring it right now. Here you go. That's the wrong one. Sorry about that.
All right, we've got Mr. Bowler, our moderator here, and town council as well still. And I'm sure everybody on this board knows, but if anybody else is tuning in, we've already rented the tent like we've done in the past to be socially distant, and same protocols will be in place for this ATM as was STM and ATM.
1 second, Sean. I got
That's fine.
update my. There we go.
You got it?
Yeah, I got it now.
Okay.
Had the old one. Remember,
All right, while Joe's bringing that up, to one of the warrant articles was on the Conservation Commission's ask for a portion of the Patton Homestead. So I met today with Joe and Richard Delongo, George Tarr, Bert, our conservation agent. Was that it, or was there anybody else on the call, Joe?
Mark Johnson.
Oh, Mark Johnson. And we discussed at length the Conservation Commission's ask, and kind of the conversation went that it wasn't quite fully fleshed out. And they're going to go back to the Conservation Committee, George and Richard, and discuss it a little bit more. The information, I think, in your packets tonight wasn't quite what they were asking. I think the information in the packets either shows the 6.6 acres or the 9 acres from the previous ask. They're actually asking for 11 plus or minus acres, which is pretty much all the space besides the homestead building itself and the stables to be in a CR. And the suggestion was giving it to Essex County Greenbelt to manage. So we felt, the group of us, that it needed a little bit more discussion and some more thought about what exactly the ask was. And the thought that we kind of ended on was that they're going to go back and talk about it. And it may not be a conservation restriction. It may be some type of a MOU or an MOA. Because it was kind of awkward that we're giving our own land to ourselves a little bit. So we're trying to work out some details so that we don't have to do all the CR, that we can just almost treat it like a CR without going through all the motions of legal and spending and surveying, etc. Did I miss anything, Joe, in that?
No, not really. We did kind of come to an agreement with Richard Luongo that the board, when you're closing the agenda tonight, would include a placeholder for the conservation restriction at the Patton Homestead, with the understanding that it's very possible that the Conservation Commission may come back in a couple of weeks and withdraw that. So yeah, the information in your packets tonight included some information that had been provided to you previously, and then the motion the proposed motion that they put forward, which mentions the 11 acres, but that's not reflected in the maps that they had previously given to us. So that's kind of where the disconnect is and the reason for the meeting today. So.
Right. So to the point that I missed, and I guess one of the more important points that Joe reiterated there was that, if it's okay with the rest of the board, we'll leave it on as a placeholder. And then most likely if it goes to print and it goes that far, we may make a motion to take no action on it if it goes that far. But we can always pull it before it goes to print.
Be the goal. If that's what the Conservation Commission wants, we're going to seek to try to get it all cleaned up.
But Sean, just ask you a question though, but we haven't, so who decides whether it's on the warrant or not? The Conservation Committee or us?
We do.
Right, but we haven't even voted on it to put it on there. So why are we holding a placeholder if we haven't even voted to put it on there?
It's a good point.
Well, they're going to come back.
I guess that we kind of talked today, and I could have been more bullheadish and said, well, it's up to us to put it on the warrant, but I felt that this is the kind of second go around with them. This is something that they would like to be on the warrant. It's not just kind of first blush, even though it's not quite fully hashed out. So I think that part of it was that we would work with them and leave it as a placeholder. But we could vote not to keep it on there at all.
Bill is right. To keep regular order, we need to follow our own policies and procedures. So you can't really make exceptions like that. It has to be by the book.
Well, we can also ask them, we can keep a place. Well, you know what? Actually, if they come back with a more fleshed out article, then we can vote to reopen the warrant and put it on. We could do it that way, or we could keep it on as a placeholder with the expectation that they'll come back to us in the next meeting and have a fleshed out article.
Shall we vote on it now?
Well, maybe just keep it as a placeholder because we don't have the final product to vote on.
My terms, when you say placeholders, I mean it's going to be automatically written in the warrant, but then we don't vote on it, or is there a chance we can still remove it from the warrant?
We can still remove it.
Right.
We don't go to print for a little while. Basically, we close the warrant tonight, just like we had planned.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been many times in the past where we've reopened the warrant to either add something or take something off.
Take it off.
before it
That's
goes to
right.
print.
Yeah.
So there is opportunity before town meeting. We could, at our regular cadence meeting, or we could even have a special 5-minute meeting to open and close the warrant for an article.
Yes,
And this-
as long as I'm comfortable doing that, as long as we vote on it before it goes to print. I don't want it to go to print before we vote on it.
This article is not petitioned, correct? This is just a requested article by a Conservation Commission? Okay.
Yeah, we're just trying to limit the need for the board to have to open and reopen and close. And when you reopen, then you'll be subject to reconsider anything that comes up between now and that date that you reopen. So we've been trying to do this in the last couple of years since I've been here, is trying to close the warrant, identify the articles that are going to be on the warrant, close the warrant, and then let town council work on the language of the warrant, and trying to therefore give the FinCom and everybody else enough, lead time to understand what's going to be considered, and have them start having their conversations and everything, do their fact finding and due diligence. So this was not an attempt to actually usurp or take away any authority of the Board of Selectmen, just an attempt to help you keep kind of bright lines on what would be on this ATM. You can always reopen if you like, but rather than do that, if you chose to leave this in here as a placeholder, we can flesh it out, and then you can always pull it later on without having to reopen.
Right. And plus, I think the understanding that I had, not at today's meeting, we didn't speak about it, but prior interactions with George, there was a feeling that if this wasn't brought from the Conservation Commission, it would be a citizen's petition. So I think that's why we're trying to work with the ConsCom with it, so it doesn't become a citizen's petition.
Right.
So I guess, that's, interesting, good information. I guess my question is, it seems like this is kind of being rushed, and why does it need to be on the warrant now? It seems like there's a lot to be figured out. Patton Homestead has.
Yeah, I agree. And part of the conversation was today that, this is just kind of my opinion, that it was, if we put all that land into conservation restriction and it's given to Greenbelt, then we're kind of cutting off our nose and spite our face almost, that we're limiting the use of that property. If there's a CR on it, we'll have to go before, if it's given the Greenbelt, we'll have to go before Greenbelt and ConsCom to do most anything at the property, which can be problematic.
John, is this just the buildable land that surrounds the homestead that we're talking about?
From the conversation with George today, and I could be wrong because he hadn't had anything mapped out, but it seemed like it was all the land except for the immediate land around the homestead itself and the stables. So it was the lower parking lot, the lower field, the back meadows, the pond, the other side, the canoe launch. It was pretty much the entire property except for the buildings.
But is it valuable, buildable land that we would be giving up? Is what I was.
About maybe
usable.
half of it.
Not buildable, but probably usable land, right? So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
Usable, right.
that's part of our investment portfolio in a way.
Right.
Maybe if we could give the land that's closest to the water, but
right. The original ask, the 6.6 acres, was pretty much what you're talking about, Darcy, was the pond and the natural kind of federal and state restrictions with the distance from the water and et cetera, and some of the open space that was around Patton Ridge property.
Right.
But this was including all the meadows and the lower parking lot, et cetera.
I just have a really hard time because it's value to the town.
Yeah, right.
And we don't know what's going to come up to our future, and land is at such a premium.
I agree with that. I agree, Darcy, that until we know what we're doing with the homestead, it seems silly to limit its use or limit its value to the town. And I also feel we have a lot of other things to worry about. I'd rather not talk about this again until after town meeting and do it for maybe next town meeting. So like Jamie says, I feel like it's rushed, and I feel like I'd rather spend our time on other things than this if we have a limited amount of time. So I'm not in favor until they sort of get the ducks in a row, and until we take a deeper dive at what the patent homestead is. I don't know that we can limit its use until we know what its use is. So, and also that we talked about real estate analysis, Sean, that you had asked them to do. I'm not sure if anybody sort of jumped in that. So I don't know what the next step is, but I'd rather not. My opinion is I'd rather not spend time on this until there's a better plan, and that maybe and I don't think there's a rush. We control the property right now. Town's not going to do anything on the property. We control the property, so there's no rush to do this right now. So we could do that as part of, if we ever sold the property, we could do it as part of a deal with the sale. Like, you're going to buy the property, and so
Right, and if we did put it up for sale with the gift agreement, at that point we could put part of it in conservation restriction to keep it open space.
Correct. Part of negotiations, right? So, so I don't know. I don't know.
So I guess that, so we don't talk about it all night, I guess. So then I guess the question for the board is, since these are potential warrant articles, regardless of my conversation today of possibly making it a placeholder, do we want to keep it on the warrant, or do we want to take it off the warrant and just work with the Conservation Commission for some type of a MOU with kind of how they handle some of that property?
Yeah, I mean, I make a motion that we remove it from this year's warrant until we have further dialogue on patent, the state, and with conservation on an MOU.
Rosie, you're the liaison. Do you have any input?
Well, I didn't know anything about this meeting today, so I'm kind of in the dark about that.
Yeah. let's hope.
I will say that I think this is not the first time, to my knowledge, in my experience with the Concom, that this conservation restriction for a portion of the patent homestead has been brought up before, and we have discussed it before. It is new to me that they're asking for 11 acres. The question would be, for me, can they present a bona fide plan to us by the next meeting, or at least, by the middle of April, that we can look at and vote on and feel comfortable with. And if they can, I think it's reasonable to give them the opportunity to do so. And I say that because Greenbelt has talked about the value of the contiguous land that includes Vineyard Hill, and the new farm property that has trails that would go right over to the canoe launch. And it would seem rather awkward for the town not to have preserved some of that property that would aid in the trails in that area. I think there's been a significant investment in that area, and it's very heavily used. And so I think we should think about it some more, and find out why they're asking for 11 acres versus the original 6.6.
I'm all about thinking about it more. I just not now, not to rush it now. I think there's no rush. We control, like you said, Rosie, we control the town. We are we're not protecting it. So we are protecting it right now. So I don't think there's a rush to it. And I'd rather focus. We got a lot of other things to focus on that actually are more concrete, more time sensitive. So that's
that's your opinion.
Yeah.
There are people who think that land conservation is very important, and we have discussed this before. So I don't think there's anything wrong with just keeping a placeholder there. And if it turns out that they don't have a finite plan, they can't present a convincing plan, then certainly the board is.
But we gave a deadline. So Joe, we gave a deadline, people to bring warrant articles to us.
Yeah.
When was that deadline?
We wanted them from the boards and committees at the end of last month, at the end of February.
Yes.
We got that.
But there are some additions to these potential warrant articles that have just appeared today, and
The ones today are more. I just sorry, Rosie, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to be clear. The ones that were added today were kind of annual financial articles, compensation classification table, types of articles that are always on. I had been running and giving you a list of articles that we're proposing that were new and stand out.
Right.
The only thing we added today were election of officers reports, compensation classification table, things that recur every year. I just wanted to kind of give you a
Well-
full picture of what would be on the warrant. That's all. I apologize.
Right. Well, the patent homestead enterprise fund budget from existing patent fund. I mean, that's,
That's
I
on it.
don't,
That's on every year.
well, I don't remember discussing the particulars of that yet. And so I don't think it's unreasonable to give them some time to come up with a concrete plan. They have full membership now, and I think it's reasonable to give them
We
some
don't have time, Rose. That's my point. We don't have
Pardon me?
time. We don't have time. That's my
Well, we
point.
do. And we can always take a vote once they've,
All right, well, I make a motion to remove the conservation restriction from the warrant this time and have them put on a future warrant when they have more information and they meet the deadlines. I think conservation is very important, and I think protecting land is very important, but it needs more time and more thought. And right now, since the town controls the property, it's not any danger of not being protected. So I vote there. We move it. We move on to more important things, and we deal with this when we have more important information. So
John, could I offer a comment on this subject?
Just 1 second, Dave. Let me see if I get a second on the motion, and then we'll discuss, and I'll let you get in the discussion.
I'll second it.
Okay. Yeah, Dave, go ahead.
My recollection of the construction activities for Patton Ridge surrounding its conformance with the groundwater protection overlay district density. The land that you're talking about putting a conservation restriction on is part of the land which was dedicated to complying with GPOD for the units that were built at Patton Ridge. Patrick Reffert has details on that. I communicated with him as recently as about a year ago. But I believe that you can't build on that property without violating the town's GPOD.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, Dave. And
go any further with it.
right, and I think part of the 11 acres that the CONSCOM is talking about is in addition to that previously designated open space for GPOD and et cetera for Patton Ridge. So it would be 11 plus the open space that we have now in that agreement.
Okay.
So any other discussion from the board? Jamie, any thoughts?
Just that I agree with Bill, and I just see no downside to waiting. Like there's nothing that makes this urgent, especially while we earn. And so urgent is different than important. Conservation is important. And it does seem like if we did leave it on there, it's almost definitely going to be sort of not as well sort of hashed out and thought about as if we waited one more cycle.
All right. Darcy, thoughts? I know Rosie's and Bill's thoughts.
Yeah. I wasn't privy to your conversation today, so I'm not quite sure how. I don't feel like I have enough information to know what to do.
To be honest, I don't think I do either, Darcy. So the information that I gained today, I mean, to put it bluntly, was that I didn't have all the information.
Yeah. Okay.
So if that's a telling thing, because I was under the assumption that this was the same ask as it was last time.
6.6 acres, like Rosie said.
Right. And so the scope today doubling in size was news to me.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to have enough time. Can they revert back to the 6.6 acres where
they could? And that was part of it why we were kind of, or at least I was kind of encouraging them to kind of go back and discuss it.
Yeah.
So, and I think that was kind of, we left it that the CONSCOM would maybe think about reverting back to the 6.6 acres. But they were going to discuss it. But it's, regardless of that fact, there's still a month past the deadline for submitting articles. So
I probably, just for time wise, because we're running really close, we're about 6 weeks away from an election, I mean, a ATM. I think it would be better to wait until they know what they want.
Okay. So we've got a motion. It's been seconded. So just to reiterate, we're voting on not placing this on the warrant, correct, Bill?
Yes, move, push it to the next town meeting. Correct, not putting this warrant, and let them put their more discussion, more thoughtfulness. Don't rush it. Do the right thing. Because once again, I just don't like the idea that we have nothing in front of us right now to discuss other than what we hearsay. So
They haven't done their due diligence.
Right. All right, so then we'll do a roll call vote. All those in favor of removing it from the warrant or potential warrant articles for this ATM, we'll say aye. So we'll start with Jamie.
Jamie Knudsen, aye.
Darcy.
Darcy Dale, aye.
Rosie.
Rosie Kennedy, no.
Bill.
William Wilson, aye.
And myself, aye. All right, so we'll remove that from the warrant. And Joe, if you could follow up with Richard and let them know we've removed it, unless they can get everything together, then we may reconsider it if that's all right with the rest of the board. But,
yeah, you're right, and that's the beauty of it. We could reopen the warrant, put it back on, but right now I think we should put some pressure on them to get their needs in order. So that's a good idea. Thank you.
So we'll kind of go right down the list here. Some are on the warrant every time. We've got election of officers, our town reports, any items for motion for consent agenda, and we can talk about that as we get a little bit closer when we're making our votes on things, what's good for the consent and which we'll have to discuss. Compensation and classification table, annual financial articles, bills of a prior year, and then we have the town hall building project general bonding authorization, 3.4 million. If I say something you want to discuss, just say hold on it and we can discuss it. Merge pool and recreation revolving accounts and authorize a spending limit of 475,000. Fiscal year 22 capital program for $338,638.
And hold on that. I just want to talk about that one a little bit more.
Okay. Stabilization fund transfer, $349,000. Our water study for $100,000.
We hold that.
Yep, and I'm going to put a hold on that one too. Town budget article, water enterprise fund, Hamilton Development Corporation article, our OPEB, our solar pilot and PPA for library roof proposal. I'm going to put a hold on that because we have Vicky with us tonight to talk about it, and we had some questions on it last time. The CPC, the patent tennis courts for 32,000, and the town hall project for 4 million. And then we have the Chabaco Road project to seek state approval to revise the CR that was in your packets with Manchester, their warrant article, patent homestead enterprise fund budget from existing patent fund, and then the last one we just discussed. So
Can I
Sorry, go ahead, Darcy.
hold on the town hall building project for the general bonding authorization of 3.4, because I think we were going to, I think Mike Toomey was going to speak a little bit.
yes, yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, I have one question too when you're done, Rosie.
Sure, I'm sorry. I just would like to know, could we put a hold on the HDC article?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, so the first, we'll just kind of go with the first in order here, not
I
necessarily.
have one more question, Sean.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we go through them all. What one was that? So I know last time we combined the articles for the bond authorization and the community preservation fund, but I thought we voted, even though we combined, I thought we voted on them a bit separately. So we we never appropriated the preservation fund, even though we didn't approve the bond. I thought we did appropriate the preservation fund and the sunset clause for that. So even though we didn't spend the money immediately, we've already allocated the money. So don't we don't have to vote on that again, correct?
Right. So Joe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the CPC ask for the grant is $1 million because we've already allocated at last town meeting the 3.4 or whatever we brought before the CPC last time. So it's not an additional 4 million. I think that number might be wrong on there.
I think that if Tom can clarify for us. You had an authorization to borrow, and that was going to be done subject to the entire project being passed to the polls. When the project failed to the polls, we didn't borrow. We didn't borrow any. So there was no borrowing done. So if you're going to go forward, it would be clearer to have
And clean it up and start, yeah. Okay.
Right, there was, so the votes, the initial votes were contingent upon passage of a Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion question. That question failed, and so now we have to revote the project as well as have a new ballot question.
All right, so we're kind of starting fresh.
I think we need to make that clear at the town meeting that the sort of the money went back into the
right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. This is
we're not spending twice, right?
That's
and
right.
I think that's a good point to make known.
Okay, sorry, Sean. That was it.
That's okay. All right, so just to kind of back up to the top there, we have the town hall building project, and we have Mike with us today. We had, I think that was the first, not the first item that we held, but one of the top of the list there. So Mike, do you want to, I can't see you right now, but I'm assuming you're on. If you want to speak.
Yes, I am on.
There he is.
Okay.
So Mike came to our CPC meeting on Thursday, and we had a unanimous decision to move forward with the bonding for it. And Mike, add anything you think is relevant.
Okay, so the question is, do we want to go to town meeting with an ask of $3.4 million, which is down $1.3 million from what we asked in December? And then if it gets approved and forwarded at town meeting, do we go right to bid in May? I'm sorry, right to town vote in May? Or do we wait until September until the economy changes, hopefully? And
We don't know.
there's a lot of pros and cons to that. We would have to rebid it if we wait till September. If we go out to town vote in May and get a positive vote, we have bids from last November held over till the end of May. So we could flip this project pretty quickly if we get a positive at town meeting and town vote.
So to Mike's points there, and we discussed this, I think it was last meeting, and I came away with what I thought we had decided, but then I talked to a few people, and I don't know if we're all on the same page about voting in the spring or the fall. My impression when we left the last meeting was that we would have it on the warrant and we would vote on it in September.
Well, that was before we had the extra funding grant money. That was before we found other grant monies as well for a generator. We have insurance money coming in for the cupola. So that was before we knew the ask was going to be very low for the town, 3.4 million. So I think that changed everything.
And it was also, it was also, Darcy, before we knew the bidders were going to hold their bid too.
Exactly.
We've got it in writing that the bidder, that the GC will hold the bid until either mid or end of May.
The end of May, yep.
Right, and I think at the time too, we were still thinking we would be in an override.
Yeah, and yes, I know a lot changed in 2 weeks, huh? Right. So Bill's suggestion that bidder fatigue will set in is real. And we don't want that to happen. We want to be able to, get this done, be straightforward, and get started on this as soon as possible before prices start rising and, people get busy and they won't be able to fit us in.
Yeah, lumber and copper goes up every single day. So
Yes.
I see it in the industry every single day. So
Right,
I'm in
exactly.
favor of us. I think they've done really good work.
Yep.
Unbelievable work in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks. So I'm in favor of pushing this forward as is proposed. And Rosie wrote a good email on it, and I sort of favor that email. So
Thank you.
I make a motion that we put the town hall funding mechanism on the ballot 5 days after the ATM is held.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? Jamie, any thoughts?
No, not really. No. Sounds good.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't thought about it. I trust what you're saying. I just know how many days make sense. But if you tell me it's Whatever.
That's the law. That's our bylaw.
Yeah,
That's our bylaw.
it has to be so many days after.
Yes.
I mean,
So, yeah.
we wouldn't want to do a special,
Five
I mean,
days.
unless we were doing it in September, it would be a special election.
Which
But it would
cost
be,
money.
which would cost us about probably $6,000 to $8,000.
About 8,000. I asked Corinne about
And
that.
it costs another 20 grand to rebid.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're just roll, and then the prices go up, and it just
Right.
gets.
Right. I think my only hesitation, and it doesn't sway me to keeping it in the fall, would be, I guess, two hesitations. One would be being able to get the word out about why we need to do it, not why we want to do it. Right.
Yep.
And the second hesitation would be there will be people who say, we just voted this down. Why are we bringing it back right now?
No, they didn't vote. What they voted down was a funding mechanism. They did not vote down. It, in fact, it passed
Right.
5-1 at our ATM at the legislature.
Right.
What went to ballot was the funding mechanism. And now we've got a renewed pricing, and we've got some really good things to bring to the ballot. So,
Could I just comment on that just for a moment?
yes.
To pick up on what Darcy's saying, we've reduced the overall cost of this job almost $300,000. We've taken $1 million off the town ask, and CPC is picking that up. So we're taking $1.3 million off of the town ask.
Right.
That's money that directly affects the tax rate. We've reduced the town ask by 28%, which is a considerable amount in the time period that we've been working in. So it's a very attractive time. Just to give you a feel, like Bill commented about materials, lumber has doubled since last June, July, till now. I just went through a pricing exercise on kiln dried lumber, exactly doubled. I have no idea where that's going to go in September, but I can tell you, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I was touching base with some people at Suffolk Construction, where I ran their estimating department, and they are inundated with requests for proposals. So the way the economy's like poised to come up, it's gonna go crazy for a while, and we could be right in the midst of that in September. We have a sweet spot here with a holdover on the bids, which I think is an important time to grasp.
Oh, and may I also just say that for contrast, almost 20 years ago, we spent $6 million on safety building. And shortly after that, we spent another, I don't know, 30 or 40 million on the Miles River Middle School. All those tax costs are going to come off in 26 and in 28. So, and also when you look at what we're getting for the $3.4 million ask compared to the public safety building for 6 million, I think, you know, and it's more than just the town hall. We're getting infrastructure like septic, parking, you know, all the other things that go with it, you know, all of that stuff, all the infrastructure. It's not just the building. So it's all the hard and soft costs and everything in between. It's comprehensive.
Right. It's soup to nuts, as they say, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's not
And-
just the building.
Right. And the other part of that, you know, we know we're going to have large expenses for the schools coming up.
Yep.
So this is their time to build a plan. And in the meantime, we have the opportunity, hopefully, to get this very necessary project done so that by the time a finite plan for the schools comes up, that'll cost a significant amount of money. We will have the two larger projects, the Miles River School and the public safety building have tumbled off the bonding, and then we'll just have the rest of this decreasing cost of the town hall. So it does take into account other projects that will be coming down the line. And also, just as a final discussion about why we would send it to town for the town vote 5 days after the town meeting, is that people are going to have a lot of things to deal with this summer. Hopefully schools will be reopening, people will be going back to work a bit, life hopefully will start to normalize a little bit, and people don't want to hear about this project for months and months and months. We have an opportunity to do some communication outreach now, which will really put it on the front burner, not only for town meeting, but for the ballot vote afterwards. And our goal is to really give out all the information now so that all voters can make an educated decision about this.
Yeah.
And just one more thing, as time goes on with this bond, it goes down every single year. So say you start out at $8 or $9 a month for the town hall. Every year it goes down until it reaches zero.
Right.
So it's not, going to put anybody in the poorhouse, so to speak.
Right.
And we do have a communications person who's working with us, and there will be outreach, plenty of it, and information. So we're ready. And
All
don't
right.
forget that most of the costs for this project are for ADA compliance and for the fire safety. That's where the money is.
Right. No, that's totally true. So we've got a motion. We've got a second. So I'm ready to call the vote. Okay. So let's start with Jamie.
Jamie Knudsen, aye.
Bill?
Wim Wilson, aye.
Rosie?
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Darcy?
Darcy Dale, aye.
And myself, Sean Farrell, aye. So you two ladies on the committee and Mike, tell our outreach person, as they say in Spinal Tap, to turn it up to 11, please, so that we can get the word out.
Yes, yes.
Yes, we will.
Pressure's on.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
the pressure's on.
Thank you, fellow board members.
And thank you, Mike, for joining us
No,
tonight.
thank you for your work.
All right,
It's
thank
a lot of progress. Let's keep
Great.
it going.
Good. Okay, good night.
Thank you.
Right.
Good night, Mike. Thank you.
All right, and then the next hold we had was on the water study, I believe.
Yeah,
And we have a few folks here. I think Dave Thompson is on the line still. I can't see him, but do we have somebody else to talk to water study?
Tim Wilson as well.
And Tim
And Heather Ford.
and Heather. Hi, Heather. So does any of you want to speak to it first to kind of explain it? We had some questions, but maybe if you give us some kind of information, and then maybe we'll answer some of our questions and maybe inform some more.
Heather?
Okay. I believe that you got the email that I sent to Joe last Thursday about what our thoughts were when we put this forth, or we made the recommendation, I guess, to Joe, who then it turned out you guys proposed to put it as a warrant article. And so we, just reiterating the email that we sent you, we kind of looked at this from a budget perspective of maintenance, which is what Tim requests every year to keep our current system going. We called them plumbing changes to maybe help us figure out where we're going in the future, new storage tanks, new piping, things along those lines. And then we had sources, and we felt that at the moment we are captive by a decision that's 30 plus years old about our water and with the source of it. So we think it's prudent, looking ahead at what Tim and company are thinking about for the plumbing systems going ahead in the next 5 years, that the numbers are very large and that we have a lot of expenses coming up. So our thought was to start talking about it now. And while it seems to some people early, to other people it seems late. So probably we're right in the middle, right where we should be. But that was the purpose. And so this water study was to start looking at sources of water. And we really feel, before you engage a consultant, that it'll be prudent for the officials. And we were vague about who the officials were, but probably the DPW, the town manager, and maybe the Board of Selectmen to go and really understand what our source options are. And then let the consultant be unleashed in a particular direction. Maybe it's 2 or 3 directions, but rather than sort of shotgun 7 directions, that we'll get a better and more qualified project or product if we really think about what makes sense for us going forward. And there are some good options out there. And yes, the thought is yes, we have enough water now, but come, March, in a month or 2, we're going to be talking about water bans already. I am sure of that. And so it's difficult to not start thinking about sources when you know that it's out there. And I have been a member of the town for 35 plus years. It's hard to believe, but and I remember the discussions that we had with Wenham over our allocations, and we're not invulnerable to changes in our allocation. So I want to make sure that we are looking forward and that we're looking at large dollars in the next 5+ years, that we're spending those dollars wisely. So I don't, where's Dave? You're there. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that? But that was sort of where we were tonight. And
Heather, can I ask you a quick question? On the, when you say consultant, you're speaking about our master planning?
Well, we have a 2019 master water plan already.
Okay. Yep, thank you.
Okay, so that was, remember we had that little discussion over the American Legion where we all sat and listened to him talk, and he had some very interesting things to say.
Yep.
And I believe that the thought is right now we're moving in several of those directions, and that is reflective potentially in the budget. But this would be an additional consultant, which is the money. And we have no particular allegiance to the 100,000. We pulled that together based on what Tim had put forth on a grant application he was putting forth. So we don't exactly know approximately how much it's going to cost, and we won't really know that till we refine the scope. And it won't be a scope that we're creating in a vacuum. We're going to have to create the scope carefully to make sure we get what we want. Otherwise, we will just get junk.
Thank you.
Let me add and emphasize some things that Heather said. First of all, just to help you comprehend the water issues in town, it's a whole lot easier if you think about our water issues in 3 compartments. The first is the source of the water, that is where we get it. The second is what Heather likes to call plumbing, which is really the storage and distribution system that gets the water around to where it has to be. And the third category is maintenance and the replacement of eons old pipes that are continually causing Tim problems. If you think of those 3 categories, I think the program that Tim runs is great. We replace pipes periodically. We're on like phase 4 or phase 5 of replacing pipes. So that whole maintenance bucket is pretty well under control. We have a water system master plan report, which identifies $10 million worth of expenses, $8 million in the next 5 years and $2 million following after that. And it generally deals with storage and distribution. It proposes 2 new above ground water storage tanks, one on Silly's Hill and the other one up on the top of Gordon Conwell, and the upgrading of the size of a number of the distribution pipes in town. And that's got a $10 million price tag on it. The third category is the source. Well, right now our source is the Ipswich River Basin for 100% of our water supply. Our quantity there is limited by our withdrawal permit, which is about 1 million gallons per day. That will never increase. We'll never get another gallon out of DEP for eons to come. It's just not going to happen. We fortunately, due to water restrictions, we consume about 42.3 gallons per day per person. Our consultant Dubry chooses to use 50 gallons per day per person because we are way below what would be considered minimum. The DEP considers 65 gallons per day per person as typical for planning. So we don't use all of our water that's permitted from the Ipswich River Basin because basically we conserve a lot and we do a good job with it. But we have plenty of water if we continue to use it the way we have. However, it's difficult water to deal with. Treatment is expensive. We've got $1 million going into the treatment plant now to deal with organics in it. And it because of the contaminants, it wears heavily on pumps and other mechanical equipment in the plant. At the same time, we own property in another river basin, the North Coastal Basin. There are more permits potentially available there because of more water resources there. Everything for us east of Essex Street, roughly, is in the North Coastal Basin. The thought here is that if we're going to spend $10 million on a plumbing system, we really ought to figure out what our strategic plan is for satisfying our water supply requirements over the next 15 or 20 years. And this proposal here is to hire a consultant, and I would suggest that probably Dewberry is the best one to do it, but a consultant who would look at the opportunities for new well sites in the North Coastal Basin. We have 4 or 5 parcels of land in and around Chabaco Lake and Beck's Pond, which may represent good sites for wells. Or there are surface water sources in Chabaco, or perhaps Beck's Pond. Or there's a possibility of connecting with Manchester, as has been discussed in the past, with Beverly Salem, with some of the adjacent towns. We should look at those possibilities. We should evaluate which ones make the most sense, which ones are technically feasible because of pressure head differences and water quality differences. We should look at what the capital cost of investing in infrastructure to make those connections would be. And we should determine now what the source of our water is going to be 10 years from now or 15 years from now when we may need it. And I say when we may need it, as I said, we only use 60% of our quota now. But if at some point the DEP decides to reallocate the water allocations within the Ipswich River Basin among the dozen or so communities that dip out of that basin, because we're only using 60% of our quota, we're going to lose water. And I think we are missing the boat if we're not planning ahead and understanding where our water sources are at that point in time, and particularly if we're going to spend $10 million on plumbing changes. And while I'm on that, I will also suggest that there are issues, assumptions, criteria in the master plan report which drive the requirements for storage and distribution, which I think the town should be a participant in reviewing as it impacts the outcome of that report. For example, the Water Master Plan report assumes that for the next 15 years, there will be a total growth in population in the town of Hamilton of 3%. That's not 3% per year, but a total growth of 3% over 15 years is what's in the Master Plan report for water. Maybe that's true, and it might well be true, but I think you guys ought to know what the assumptions are if we're going to spend $10 million and find out that we haven't planned for any growth in the population of the town of Hamilton. That's enough.
All right. Thoughts, comments, questions for Heather, Dave, or Tim?
Well, just piggybacking on what Dave just said, I thought at our last meeting we had talked about postponing this $100,000 study until the master plan is completed, because it's a boatload of money when you think about a new water source and all the infrastructure that goes along with it. But the other part of that is what are we going to need? And as Heather said, this study right at this moment would set us off into every possible direction. It seems more prudent to me that we get the master plan done, so we have some sort of a vision of what the town's going to look like in 10 years. And then we would at least have an idea of what are we going to need, because this is not going to come free. So and $100,000 is not chump change. That's a lot of money. So it seems like we could wait just a little bit until after the master plan is done, so that we would be more focused in what are we going to look at. Are we going to look at supplementing our water? Are we going to look at a whole new new source? And also, I thought we just did a drilling study over in Chabaco Lake area, and it proved to be not very successful. So I'm just thinking we should really have a plan to have a plan.
Yeah.
And we can do a lot of inquiring sort of informally. We can find out what does the North Coastal Basin have available. We can find out informally what does Beverly Salem say about us tapping into their system. So I'm not saying don't do some work now, but it just seems like a huge investment for something that has no boundaries at present.
Yeah, I mean,
Let me first give you a couple of facts. The $10 million that comes out of the water master plan is basically driven not by population growth. It's driven by assumptions regarding scenarios involving fire or emergency pipe breakages or things like that. So the growth number really doesn't come into play in that particular situation. The last point you made, Rosie, on the drilling, yeah, we did some drilling over next to Beck's Pond that they found 2 knobs of rock around in the middle of a swamp, and they tried to drill holes in it. I don't think it was a very well thought out program, and I believe that there are probably some other areas around Chabaco Lake where we could find better drilling situations, and they're parcels that are town owned now. There are town owned parcels around Chabaco Lake that might be water resources.
Yeah, I mean,
we need to think about some of these things. I'm not saying that we need to go out and do a lot or spend a lot of money on infrastructure, but we need to have a plan of where we're going to be 10 years from now. Are we going to hook up with Manchester? Are we going to hook up with Beverly? Are we going to do our own thing? You know, what are the opportunities? What kind of permits can we get out of the North Coastal Basin? What you know, what kind of pressure heads does Beverly run that that it's going to be a problem for us, or the other way around? What about water quality issues? Well, you know, what's the pH of the water that Beverly has versus ours? And, you know, what kind of infrastructure we're going to need to bring that stuff online and make that connection over there. We don't have to do it. I just think we need to think about where we're going to go. What is the solution to our problem?
Right.
And can we do any of that informally at this point before we commission a formal water study for at a cost of $100,000? I mean, is that something that we can do as sort of a preliminary amongst the town people?
Well, I think if we're dealing with Dewberry, it can be a negotiated deal. We could sit down and say, look, this is our goal. You know, how much of this stuff can we get done, and what kind of prices would go with it? So you might have a flexible scope. You might tell them you only want to spend 50 grand or 30 grand. What can you do for that? Is that enough? Oh, let's do a little bit more and call it done. But to get some information so we're going in the right direction. Tim, are you still on? Yeah, you're on there.
Bill, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to Selectmen need to discuss this a little bit. So, because I think I think you're going to get from the Selectmen, you're going to get a lot of support for water. I mean, we've been dealing with water for the last 3 years I've been on. I think every town meeting we've supported, water needs in this town. So we know it's important. I think that the last meeting we talked, and once again, I welcome the CapCon. I mean, we're glad that we formed this committee a couple of years ago. We're glad you guys, this is what we need, right? This is the kind of thought process we need, the kind of proactiveness we need. I think what the problem was is the last meeting that Rosemary talked about, we sort of decided that, we raised, appropriated $1.5 million to do the plant, which isn't done yet. We're trying to do town hall. We're trying to do a master plan. And we kind of felt we wanted to focus on those things, not to not be proactive, but those are some pretty important projects that we wanted to focus, our our small staff on in our small town to sort of make sure those things are successful. I thought moving that to next year's meeting after we did the town hall, after we got, the water plant up and running, after we got the master plan done, made the most fiscal sense. So I think we're 100% in favor of the study. I just thought that we thought it made sense to move it, 6 months to a year without impacting anything negatively. So I completely support it. I thought we'd agreed to sort of do it, after the other projects. So.
Well, I
Tim,
think
did you want to add something?
Tim is in a position now of being in position of a master plan, which says, we're going to build a reservoir this year and another one 2 years after that, and put in a bunch of pipes and all that. So when I sit down with him to put together his capital wish list, I get all of these big numbers, which we're struggling with how to deal with. And some of them, I think frankly, somebody needs to sit down with Dewberry and say, well, do we really need to make these kind of assumptions because it leads to these kind of costs? Because I have some serious questions that I think should be addressed on behalf of the town, because I don't think we need to spend $10 million. When was the last time we had insufficient water to fight a fire in the town of Hamilton? I'd suggest you want to ask the fire chief that question.
Tim, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I the master plan that Dave's talking about, I mean, that was a study that we had done based upon our current infrastructure, our current needs. The improvements that he's talking about was to bring Hamilton up, to improve their fire protection, storage, of our current system. That's what he was looking at. He did look into some other alternatives for future, as in tying into Manchester, tying into Beverly Salem. But the goal of that whole program, that whole report, was to take what we currently have and where are we deficient? Where do we need to make improvements? He found that our storage was not sufficient enough. Therefore, instead of one large tank, he did a couple different alternatives. He said, okay, instead of one large tank up at the seminary, why don't we do 2 small tanks? It improves pressures in systems by spacing the 2 tanks out. And it actually was a less cost scenario based upon the 2 tanks versus a large tank, because it reduced the amount of water main improvements we had to make. So his goal was just to use what our current system was, what our current demand is, and come up with a short-term and a long-term plan, infrastructure, as well as looking at some long-range alternatives for sources. The North Coastal is a desirable basin. We actually really don't have many options that would be outside of Manchester's watershed. They own a lot over in the Tobacco Road area, Tobacco Lake, Beck's Pond. That whole area is a lot of Manchester watershed. So I don't know what the rules and regulations are when it comes to that, but we did explore a property that was adequate sized over there, because we also have to take that into consideration. With it's not a we're not drilling for a residence. We're drilling for a production well for the town. What we did find was the groundwater over there had iron and manganese in it. So therefore it would still have to be treated. And that's not even close to our treatment plant. So there's a lot of infrastructure improvements to make to even use that.
Tim, let me ask you a question. The question is, if we waited 6 months or a year to do this study, would we be, that's really
and I think Joe was going to pipe in on this, but we are actually, and he can follow up with me, we're actually looking at a grant, working with more of a regional approach, working with Ipswich River Watershed, as well as some surrounding towns, to explore. A lot of the towns around us are in the same predicament we are. So we think of more of a regional approach, but there is a grant that we are looking to submit an application for in September. We have some early communications with some neighboring towns. Like I said, we've talked to Ipswich River Watershed, trying to get the regional approach, get them on board with us. That goes a long way. So Joe can, if you have any other. This grant may be obviously something to pursue, and I think we have a pretty good chance. I think we have, if we can get some regional support, that does wonders on that type of application.
I think the risk in the regional approach, Tim, is that there's not enough water to go around, and Hamilton doesn't use more than about 60% of its quota. So when you start looking regionally, what do you think is going to come out of that?
All right. It's the same thing that happened when we did a regional thing with Wenham. We lost part of our allocation to Wenham when we tried to regionalize with them. I mean, that's a fact.
I think there's some other towns, some other thoughts, some other.
But I think tonight our debate is. I think these are all good points you're making. Tonight our debate is whether we want to appropriate the funds this year or down the road for this 100. That's what I'm want to hear out of you, is that no, it can't wait one more day. Because like I said, when we appropriated the $1.5 million of the plant, which we haven't even built yet, that was your most important need. So
sure.
The question is,
and I can answer your question. It's my most important need today. For the short term, for the immediate need, the plant needs to be fixed. We need to remove the organics or reduce the organics out of our current source water. Long range planning is long range. I mean, it could be 3, 5, 10 years out before a regional approach or whatever approach alternative comes our way. But we need to fix the problem now. So we do have water. We are well below our registered volume every year. We do have capacity for some growth. Our plant is running great. We just have an issue with the raw water, the organics in the raw water. So we just need to make those changes in the short term. DEP is looking for us to do that work. We are making some temporary improvements, or we're doing some temporary things in the system that keeps those numbers down, but they are looking for a permanent solution, like I've told you in the past. That's where that project will come. I do think it's still necessary and it's very important to get done. We are actually looking to submit final plans, I believe next week, for permitting for that work. So we need to fix the short term, the immediate, and then we can look long term. I was just showing or telling the group here that we are looking at a grant for that long term approach, one alternative, but it's hopefully a grant. So why not go after it and try to lock down that money?
All right, go ahead, Joe.
Just real quick, and to answer Bill's short-term question, my position as town manager and talking with Tim is, while I understand the need for the long-term study, and Tim and I are focused on finding ways to do that long-term study, we're not proposing to do any other water projects in the next 2 or 3 years. So it's possible that we could wait on this. I put the proposal to the board as a separate article to fund the water study because the Capcom had suggested it twice. It's not a capital ask, but it was worth this conversation. That said, I'm confident that we can start looking into the long-term issues without taking $100,000 out of free cash at this town meeting, and we can continue to work with what we've got. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, I was just gonna, before Joe spoke there, I was gonna say kind of similar vein that, even though I think all this information from Heather and Dave was great for background and for Tim as well, but I think what we got a little bit sidetracked there, but I think the topic tonight is whether we include it in the warrant or not. We discussed it last meeting, and Rosie rose those points that I think the leaning we had last time was that we wanted to do the master plan, get the pre-treatment going, and that this, well, to Bill's point also, was that we wanted to have this as something on our to-do list, that it wasn't a to-do now on our list. I think we're all in support of, and we know that it's a major issue now and on the horizon, but I think we felt, and I don't mean to speak for the group, that we would wait on this article till possibly next ATM when we had a little bit more master planning under our belt and some more negotiations with Beverly Salem and Manchester and et cetera. So we can make a more educated scope for the ask, and as Dave and you and Heather alluded to, that, $100,000 was just kind of a round number that you had. It wasn't exactly a finite number for the scope that we're looking at. And we want to be laser focused with this and not kind of all over the board. We want to get the best information we can.
I understand what you're saying, Sean, and of course, I've heard this story a million times in business. You have to focus on what needs to be done today, and we'll deal with what has to happen in the future with our strategic plan. And I think, we got an issue with the treatment plant. We've got to deal with it, but I would encourage you to keep this in the back of your mind. As the capital committee, we're obligated to remind you of it, and I assume that you'll get reminded about it next year.
No, that's great. I mean, this is what we hoped you guys would do. So this is perfect information. So
I would like to encourage somewhere that somebody take the bull by the horn and start through the process, because I think there's a lot of legwork to get to where we want to go.
So.
Yeah.
So, I'm hearing everybody say, yeah, this is important, but somebody's got to take the lead and charge through with it. So
I think that's a valid point, Heather. Jamie, did you want to say something?
Yeah, mostly just right on those notes, just, instead of just the back of the mind, Dave, I think the kind of front of mind, I think it's been some of our discussion. I appreciate Joe kind of doing, working towards this, because I think it was part of our discussion of town manager goals. I think it was a, somewhat significant discussion at that time for him to be working on this. And so he's doing it. And it is important. I think I would not want to put it as waiting until we do the master plan, like the town master plan.
But I think it's an in tandem kind of a thing, right?
Yeah, because I think it probably, it interacts with it. So I think we should do it soon. It seems like maybe we can explore the grant and other ways to do it on a little less expensively than 100,000.
I wanted to put John on the spot. John Pruitt, I don't know if you had a chance, John, to think about this, but you're pretty good at the insight on sort of proactive planning for future expenses. But FinCom talk about this at all? You have any thoughts on spending this money now versus waiting a year?
Really, I mean, this has been a great conversation. I mean, I would say, and I want to speak to all the members of FinCom, we're certainly behind spending the money on a water study. Definitely see the need for it. And so then it really comes down to timing. And the question is, do we gain anything or lose anything by waiting? It sounds like what I'm hearing is we don't, although I certainly, listening to Dave and Heather, would not want to be, if we do push it off, I wouldn't want to be in the same position a year from now, having done nothing in the meantime. So we've got to be honest with ourselves. Can we actually move the ball forward in the next year without spending money? And if we really think we can, perhaps we wait. That would be the way I would look at it. But if we can't, then maybe, spending the money, or at least appropriating the money now, since it would be coming from free cash, at least gets the ball rolling. If not, at least starting the process, if it's not fully spent within the next year, of actually getting a consultant or doing the prep work to knowing that we're going to spend money before the fiscal year is up on a consultant. So
I just want to add one thing.
To be honest, what can we actually get done in the next year, so we're not kicking the can down the road.
All right.
Something to consider is we have our master plan, our proposals. We had a proposal come in. There is an element of the master plan that includes utilities, sewer, water, infrastructure. There may be a chance, depending on what those prices come in at, to maybe include some additional water sources, water investigation in that master plan to a degree that maybe we all seem comfortable with if the budget allows. So that's.
I think there's quite a few things that can be done for short money in terms of investigating. For example, Tim talked about the water resources in the North Coastal Basin that's controlled by Manchester. Well, that's Hamilton property.
Yeah.
We gave them the right to mine the water out of Hamilton in that part. Now, when we did that way back when, did we reserve any rights to access some of that resource? Those things can be looked at. It's a paper shuffling exercise, and we can meet with Beverly Salem, we can meet with Manchester, we can meet with our surrounding towns, and get an understanding of what the issues are. We don't have to spend a whole lot of money putting pipes in the ground or anything like that. Just figure out what the problems are.
Right. That's right.
So if you could add that onto the end of your study, Tim, that would kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah, we'll see. I think we plan to look at that pretty quickly. So we'll see if there's capacity there to do something like that.
That'd be a good way to start.
All right. So does anybody want to make a motion on that water study?
So we're
That's kind of
This is
a
a loaded question. So what it sounds like that we're going to, okay, so I'll make a motion that we hold off on allocating the $100,000 for the water study for up to a year, so that we would start to, we can do a lot of informal investigation. So how does that sound for
What about
for a
what
motion?
Tim was talking about and having a water study incorporated with the master plan? He said that was a possibility.
Right, but we already have a boatload of money invested in that, and there's I maybe I misunderstood, but it sounded like he's saying we could get maybe some of the groundwork done through the master plan and then augment that with additional funding, additional study when we're more focused on what direction would be best to go in.
Right.
So so what do you think of that motion?
Perfect. I think it's confusing enough. I'll second it.
Okay. Good.
All right.
We didn't say no. We just said not yet.
That's right. That's right.
All right. So we'll do a roll call vote for not yet.
Okay.
We'll start with Bill.
Wayne Wilson, aye.
Rosie.
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Darcy.
Darcy Dale, aye.
Jamie.
Jamie Knudsen, aye.
And myself, aye. But thank you so much, Heather and Dave and Tim, for sticking with us and giving us some information. I think it's all, we're taking it all to heart, and we do think it's very important, but just not yet. But very soon. Working on it in the background.
And keep on top of us. Yeah, keep on us. So thank you.
All right. And I moved my screen, so I don't know the next thing that was held. Does anybody remember what it was, Joe, if you got your list?
I just want to hear more about the capital, the rest of the capital.
I had capital stabilization and solar pilot, and Vicky's on the line waiting to talk about solar pilot BPA. So
why don't we do the solar with Vicky? That way she can go on with her life. Hi, Vicky.
God.
How's everyone?
Well,
We're
it's
good.
10:04. Woohoo! Yeah.
So, Vicky, we had some kind of questions, and if you could give us just kind of a general overview of the library roof project and your thoughts.
Sure. So we started looking at solar at a number of municipal buildings about 2 years ago. We got a feasibility study grant, and we looked at the water treatment plant, public safety, and recreation. And just for different factors, the public safety building and the water treatment plant kind of fell out of favor for solar, and library recreation center kind of percolated to the top as the most viable and the most economically favorable for the town. I can tell you why, but that's kind of the short version. So we had them look at the library more closely and the recreation center, and in talking to the library director and the recreation center director, they also had a roof replacement project on deck for that building because of water infiltration and other issues. So it's good because now that we're doing the roof, or trying to get money to do the roof, we can kind of build it to make it solar ready it wasn't good at the time because we thought it was going to be this huge delay, but it's actually going to work out because by the time we get the interconnection agreement and we get the incentives all set, it's going to be pretty much time to do the roof if everything goes according to plan and put the solar on top of the new roof. So it's actually going to work out timeline, hopefully. So the proposed program is 137 kilowatt DC. And it's on both the flat rubber roof and the shingled roof at the library. And it will generate about 80% of what the building uses.
If you want to share this, I made you a co-host. So if you want to share your screen, you can.
Oh, you know what? I have it up on my other computer because
No problem.
sorry, otherwise I would.
Okay.
I mostly just put it up as a cheat sheet to answer questions any of you guys have. So what we're looking at is a similar contract agreement to what we have at the landfill, which is a 20-year power purchase agreement. So a third party would build the array, maintain the array, own the array, enjoy the federal tax credits, which just got extended, which was good for this project. And the town would buy all the power that the array generates for a 20-year term for a fixed rate. That's kind of the overall contract structure. So the savings to the town based on what we're paying for power now and what we would be buying it from the array for is around $2,000 a year. And it would go up as, you know, the predicted electricity prices go up, our savings would go up. And there's a, you know, a savings schedule that they provided over 20 years. So that's kind of the high level view of the project. I'm happy to answer questions you guys may have.
Any
There will be two articles. So there'd be one for the pilot and one for the PPA. So just so you know.
Okay. And I guess if anybody has any questions for Vicky, otherwise we can vote on keeping it on the warrant, which I think we all agreed to. We just had some questions or some, I think she's answered most of them, but any additional?
Motion
Yeah.
that we vote to keep the solar pilot and the PPA for the library roof on the warrant article, as a warrant article. Is that what I was supposed to do?
Yeah, that works. Rosie, did you second it?
Sure, yes.
Okay, perfect. And we'll do a roll call. And then at the end, all the ones that we didn't held, we'll do all as one motion, okay? And we'll expedite things since it's about 2 a.m, or at least it feels.
Yeah.
All right.
Daylight
So,
saving time's only 9, really.
right.
It's 10.
John,
Yeah, Bill.
John, just a quick clarification on this.
Yeah.
Under the agreement with Wenham, does Wenham need to approve this or?
Yes,
Is
they
it
would
on-
as well. Yeah,
Is it going to be on their warrant?
clarification.
It's on their warrant as well, or how does it work under the intermunicipal agreement?
Sure. So there's 2 items that have to be approved by town meeting, and we've worked with KP Law on this. The first one is the pilot, which will be with the town of Hamilton because the building is geographically in Hamilton.
Right.
So that article will only be on Hamilton's warrant. The authorization to enter into the power purchase agreement has to be on both towns' warrants because both towns pay the electric bills. So both towns will be enjoying the benefits.
Right, that's correct. Because both towns will be entering into basically the power purchase agreements, and because they are for terms of 20 years, that would require the approval of both boards. However, the solar pilot, because the building is located in Hamilton, does not involve a vote by the Wenham Board of Selectmen or by town meeting.
Gotcha. Thanks, Tom. All right, so we got a motion, a second. We'll do a roll call. All those in favor, we'll start with Bill.
Let me make sure I'm not on mute here.
You're on.
Okay, William Olson, aye.
Rosie,
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Darcy,
Darcy Dale, aye.
Jamie,
Jamie Knudsen, aye.
and myself, Sean Farrell, aye. Thank you so much, Vicky. Thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah,
Thank
Good
you.
to see you all.
All right, what was the next item, Joe?
Stabilization fund appropriation.
What?
And who held that one? Did somebody?
I thought Bill called for
Sorry, what do you say?
Stabilization fund.
No, I said capital. I just wanted to hear more about the capital. I may have missed that mean, but just the $343,000. Just wanted to hear more of what that was. So that's all.
Okay, yeah, I don't have that with me, but that was we went over that at the joint meeting on the Saturday morning meeting. It's about just under $350,000 of things that were vetted by the capital committee and brought forward. We pared it down. We originally were targeting $500,000, and the request is quite a bit less than that, which was our goal. So
that's fine. I just want that's what I was missing, Joe. That explanation, because it wasn't the same amount. So
yeah.
All right, that's fine.
All right. Do you want to make a motion on that one, Bill, or do you want to just do one motion at the end with that one?
We can roll that one in.
Okay. What was the next one held, Joe?
So Bill said he didn't want to hold stabilization, so that leaves only the HDC article.
Okay.
Rosie,
Rosie, did you hold that one?
Yeah, I didn't know anything about it, so it'd be good to have some information.
I think that's our annual meals tax appropriation to the HDC to the tune of, I think, $70,000 on average, 65 to 75.
I think last time it was 55.
Was it?
No,
Can I jump in on this?
Yeah. Hey, Rick, go ahead.
Howdy, and congratulations. You guys have been at it for 4 hours.
No.
337. So.
Yeah, the meals tax is going to be significantly less this year. The last one was 75,000, but that was from the 2019 elections. So this year's will be from 2020 elections. And we know, and we've budgeted at the HDC for a significant decrease. We're expecting, we actually budgeted for close to zero on this. And,
right.
You know, John asked, we had a meeting with the FinCom last week, and John was asking me, what do you expect from this? My guess is maybe $15,000, $20,000 at maximum. So we're fortunate that we don't need that to be paying a mortgage this year, because we did close on the Willow Street project on January 29th. And we're looking to reinvest those proceeds. We're talking to the owners of the Dodge Tree property and Welch and Lamson to see if there might be an opportunity to purchase that property and try and develop that lines of a Willow Street project, or something that's going to generate more than $6,500 a year, which is what the Dodge Tree property currently generates in tax revenue. So that's a little bit of background on what we expect for meals tax, but we do need the meals tax when it does come back in order to be able to develop another piece of property.
So I maybe I misunderstood, but I thought there was not going to be an ask this year, since you did sell the property, and the fact that the COVID pandemic has certainly gutted meals tax. Maybe I misheard that.
No, we would like to accumulate whatever may come from that. For example, we put together with Patrick and Joe a proposal to the Mass Office of Business Development, a $50,000 proposal to help downtown businesses, and we're contributing monies to that. We're also going to be looking at how we can, when the parking study is done, which we're paying 50% of, is helping the town with signage and pedestrian flow. So we are going to be expending monies, and we don't want to let go of the meals tax, even though it's going to be a very, very small amount.
Will you come to town meeting with a specific ask?
Oh, absolutely.
And you don't expect it to be more than $10,000 or $15,000, is that correct?
Well, I think what we ought to do is sort of what we did last year, is ask for, we split it with the town. We took 50, the town took 25 last year. So, you know, we could do a percentage split along those lines, whatever comes. But we want to keep the precedent going that the town meeting has voted for 8 years unanimously to keep funding the HDC and its activities.
Right, but that was also before that was also when you had a mortgage and you didn't have any income. This year, the HDC paid off its mortgage and has a substantial income this year as of January 29th.
Don't have income. We're certainly sitting on a nice chunk of change.
Right, well,
But we're looking to invest that, reinvest that
right.
as soon as we can. So we're not sitting on that thinking about, ways we can spend it. We're actively engaged in figuring out ways we can spend it. And if the opportunity comes to buy that piece of property or a piece of property, we're going to need a source of revenue to go to the bank and say, we have the financial capability to pay off a mortgage.
And what was the profit from the sale of the Willow Street property?
Well, we received $538,699.86. But that's not profit, that's proceeds, because for the term we had to spend $310,000 in mortgage, $110,000 for site plan review. We paid close to $50,000 in property taxes while we were trying to get the property developed.
Right.
We also expended money for downtown wreaths, flower baskets, benches, and engaging consultants to look at wastewater treatment. So
right.
It's not like we made
but
money on this.
Those are all past expenses, Rick. I'm talking about what's your balance sheet now showing.
Right, and it's the 500. It's the 538,000.
Okay, and so you would still ask for the $10,000 or $15,000.
Well, as I said, it would be. We're certainly happy to talk about a percentage split with the town that we did last year. So whatever that number is, we don't know what the receipts are going to be for this fiscal year. So I think
But in fairness to the town, they were footing the bill when the HDC didn't have the finances to foot their own bill. And now, at least this year, you have a substantial positive balance, and the town would otherwise put that money into its fund. And so it seems unreasonable this year, given the circumstances of COVID, given all the expenses that the town has incurred and all the financial hits the town has taken. And it just would seem it would seem prudent to forego your ask this year based on those factors.
Yeah, man.
Well, I can see.
Could I just perhaps give a little clarification on this? When the town adopted the meals tax a dozen or more years ago, it was with the clear understanding that was made at town meeting that the money would go to be used in the downtown business area for downtown business purposes. At the time, they said we couldn't set up a separate fund but it had to go into the general fund. But it was with the clear understanding that it would be almost like it would act like a revolving fund. It would go in the general fund, and whatever the amount was would then be annually transferred to the HDC. So it's not a question of the HDC asking. It was set up so that it would go from the general fund, whatever the amount was, on an annual basis.
Right. That was my understanding when we started it.
Right. There are other things that the town could use to improve the quality of the downtown without it necessarily going through the HDC. Since the HDC acts independently of the town, its charter is not that it is part of the town. So I'm just suggesting that the town could use that money, and the HDC is quite capable of funding its own endeavors, at least for this year.
Yeah. I mean,
Well-
so Rick, what I appreciate Rosemary's opinion. My opinion is that the HCC is town of Hamilton, and what you do, the services you provide to our downtown are invaluable, and I appreciate that. And so, I don't think, once again, I think that whatever split you do or whatever, but it's meals, it doesn't affect our tax rate, right? It's a meals tax, it's a use tax. So money raised downtown supports downtown. So, and we've done this for how many years in a row? So I appreciate the dialogue, but, I'm not sure where we're going with it. So,
Yeah. Well, it's just a lot of people in prior town meetings have objected to the meals tax going to HDC. And I want to be able to have a legitimate reason for saying, yes, we should continue that.
All right, well, how about this? First of all, the town, as Bill Bowler indicated, voted for the meals tax with the express understanding it would go to downtown development. The Board of Selectmen stated that as policy when they supported the creation of the meal tax, and the legislature, as Darcy likes to refer to it, has consistently and overwhelmingly supported the meals tax being devoted to the downtown. The Willow Street project is going to generate $50,000 in new tax revenues for the town. So it's not costing the town money. It's generating additional new revenue to the town. The HDC wants to have a consistent revenue that the people have said they want going to the HDC, so it can invest in new property that's going to generate additional new tax revenues that this town desperately needs. So this is not, and as I said, we are actively looking to buy a new piece of property as soon as we can. The appropriation in fiscal 2021 or 2021, or is it 22?
It'll be 22.
22 starts in July 1st and runs through the entire next year. So we're working actively to find a way to reinvest those funds that are going to generate new tax revenues to the town. So we need that meals tax money. The town voters have consistently said it should go to the HDC, and I see no reason we should change that.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you for answering my question.
Well, thank you. I think it's a legitimate question, and I'm happy to answer it. We looked at the sale of this and said, hey, this is going to be both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because we have the monies to reinvest to try and generate new revenues, but a curse in a way that people will say, well, gee, you're sitting on all this money. You don't need the tax, the meals tax. But that would be kind of short-sighted because we want to reinvest those dollars in a way that are going to produce more tax revenue.
All right. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Rosie. Anybody want to make a motion on this particular article? Or I think this was the last one held, right, Joe? So
Yes.
we could either make a motion on this and a motion on the remainder that we haven't discussed that I think we're all in favor of, or whatever.
Combine them. Did you just
yeah,
say?
Joe, can you pull up the list again, and we can just vote on all of them except for
Yeah.
the ones.
I'm working, looking for it right now. We got so many different things open up here. Okay, so as of right now, you have voted to withdraw the water study article and the conservation restriction for patent homestead article. Everything else on this list is there. The only one that you haven't made a decision about is Hamilton Development Corp article.
Okay.
So I make a motion to put the Hamilton Development Corporate article on the warrant.
My consent.
Second.
Okay. And then I'll do roll call vote for those in favor. We'll start with Rosie.
Yep. Rosie Kennedy. Okay. Yes.
Thanks, Rosie.
I'm tired.
Sorry. I'm going to have
Getting punchy.
Thank you, Rosie.
Darcy, did you say yes?
Darcy Dale, aye.
Okay. Jamie?
Jamie Knudsen, aye.
Bill?
Owen Molson, aye.
Myself, Sean Farrell, aye. And then I'll entertain another motion for the remainder of the articles.
Sean, I'm sorry. Can I ask you one more question? And we may have already answered this, and I apologize if we did. But the Community Preservation Fund asked for 4 million. I was under the impression, and I know that we talked about needing to revote the whole project funding. But the community, the CPC funding, I was under the impression that the 3 million is still there and still available, and we do not need to revote that. But it's just the $1 million additional grant that the town meeting needs to vote on. So can somebody just clarify that for me?
Why don't we ask Tom, because my understanding is that the authorization was made to borrow at the special town meeting, but that authorization, when the borrowing didn't happen, expired 90 days later. So
I thought, I'm sorry, Tom.
Sure. Yes. Yes, as Joe indicated, so I think I mentioned it earlier that the votes that were taken at the at town meeting to approve the borrowing were both contingent upon the passage of a debt exclusion vote.
Okay.
That debt exclusion vote failed, so that contingency obviously never came into
But it wasn't
play.
written. Tom, I agree with you. That was the intent. It wasn't written that way in the warrant. The CPC warrant article is not written with a contingency in it. So that's my only.
I mean, I can certainly. I'll take another look at it. Certainly, you know, I can certainly take another look at it.
Yeah, to vote it again and make it clean on an issue with it. But the way it was written in the original warrant, the debt exclusion was only on the bond part of it. But
town part of it, yeah.
Okay, I'll take a look at it. That was not my recollection, but I can certainly take another look at it, and we can clarify it for the board at the next meeting, which I'm assuming I'll attend once we formalize.
Whether or not whether it doesn't or does, do we think it's better just to reset everything rosy, or is it better? I mean, so that's the question, right?
Jay Butler had consistently said that based on some of the things that they've voted on prior, there wasn't a sunset on this, there wasn't a contingency on it. So I
think
people.
We could be talking about two different things, though. I think perhaps if we're talking about, does the CPC itself have to vote to approve the project in its entirety, or just approve the project and just really the $1 million additional ask? That's a different question from whether or not town meeting has to vote to authorize the borrowing again and then go through the debt exclusion vote.
So I think right now, if I can add some confusion or clarity, the CPC at our meeting on Thursday was basically acting as if we've already encumbered the previous ask from town meeting. And the ask we got on Thursday was for an additional $1 million.
Right.
So the CPC is under the impression that this is in addition to previously approved monies. We typically have a 2-year sunset on our grants. You know, they'd have to pull a building permit or do something with it in that time frame. So kind of a clarification with either Stuart Saginaw at the CPC at the state level, or Jay Butler and maybe Diane in the financial department to figure that out, in Utah as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly the question, because it certainly is a lot, and appearances, right? 4 million is a really scary number when town meeting had already approved 3 million, and if that stands, then all the better to just be asking for another million. So thank you.
Or better, I agree. Yeah, if we could ask for 1 million and still have the previous stand, that would be a lot better optical.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rosemary.
All right. So where did we leave off? Was there a motion?
I make a motion to approve the balance of the warrant articles that had not been voted on yet per Joe's list of edits and crossouts.
Second.
All right. All those in favor, we'll start with Darcy.
Darcy Dale, aye.
Jamie.
Jamie Knudsen, aye.
Bill.
William Olson, aye.
Rosie.
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
And myself, Sean Farrell, aye. All right, only 10 more items, folks.
Oh, you know what? I don't think this is too much.
You want to make a motion, Darcy?
I would
Could
love to
you-
make a motion. Can we
Yeah.
reschedule the balance of our work
Yeah.
for another time?
Yeah, so let's just review kind of what we have left. So we have the town election, discuss and vote on possible ballot questions.
Oh,
I think have we covered that pretty much with our town hall?
I know of no other ballot questions that were being proposed, only whether or not to have the vote, and you guys took that up already, so.
Right, so that one we can check off. The water abatements, is Tim still on the line?
Tim is still here, and
Is
basically.
that something that is pressing that couldn't wait 2 weeks for the water abatements?
Yes, I would like it handled since it was tabled last meeting, if possible.
Okay, yeah, I think that one can be quick if everyone's.
Oh, yeah, so I was the one who made the comment last time. I read what Tim sent over, and it doesn't say one bill, it says one time. So if one time includes two concurrent bills, that
Right.
still falls within our, so I'm fine with it now. I thought the way it was written, it was one bill, one time, but it's not, it's just at one time. So if two consecutive bills are the one, what that means though is in the future, we should have the abatement be one abatement and not two separate abatements or two separate bills. So I think that's a procedural thing on our end. So in the future, I would just request that maybe they wait till they get the two bills and put them together. So there's one abatement. So that's
Yeah,
my
I mean, we don't need to get into too much. It's just a time lapse because it takes us, when we read it,
About a
takes
month,
us
right?
about a month to get the bills out. So there always could be that overlap that doesn't get picked up until the next quarter read.
Right. So I'm fine. I'm fine with interpreting it as a one-time abatement that covers two billing periods. So,
Fair.
so I make a motion to approve the water abatements that are open on the agenda. for tonight.
Second,
All right, all those in favor, we'll start with Darcy,
Darcy Dale, aye.
Rosie,
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Bill,
William Olson, aye.
Jamie,
Jamie Knudsen, aye.
myself, Sean Farrell, aye. And then the last item we had was a master plan steering committee. We can table that one if anybody wishes to make a motion to table it.
I make a motion to table that item.
Second.
Okay. Now, Tom, point of order. Do we need to vote on that, or since it's been tabled, is it automatically tabled? I can't remember.
I think we have to vote.
I would vote on it just to be on the safe side. And I did actually just have one question for clarification after you take that vote.
Sure. So all those in favor, we'll start with Darcy,
Darcy Dale, aye.
Rosie,
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Bill,
William Olson, aye.
Jamie,
Jamie Knudsen, aye.
myself, Sean Farrell, aye. All right, Tom.
My question was just on the ballot question. So I take it that we're going to include the same ballot question as we had last time around with respect to the town hall project to exclude the debt associated with the project, and it's going to be included on the annual town election ballot. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood. That's what I understood.
The number will be different, but.
Yeah, the number will be different, but the language will be the same.
But
Right. And actually, I don't believe that the number is included in the debt exclusion vote.
Right.
It's only in the override or an underride.
Okay.
All right.
May I make a motion?
You may.
Well, there's one other item on your agenda.
Yeah, executive session to sort of.
Yeah.
We have to do that for at least.
We can be quick with
That's
the
very
executive
quick, yeah.
session.
Thank you.
Very quick. Yeah, we just have one thing to do.
I would say 10 minutes for executive session if everyone can hang.
I can't think. I'm sorry. You have to do it without me.
There's no thinking involved. It's just you two relaying what you've learned.
We have to
There'll be no
start.
discussion.
We have to start a process because it's getting against the clock here with the situation. So
Yeah, bear with us for 10 minutes, ladies.
5
I mean,
minutes.
I don't even know if it'll be 10 minutes.
5 minutes. We'll guarantee you 5 minutes.
Do you need me to stay or not?
No, I think you can go, Tom, and we'll connect, or you'll give my contact information to Labor Council, and then we'll next executive session we'll have him.
John, do you
Okay,
have
great. Okay, thank you.
John, do you have what you got to
Okay,
read?
good night, everybody.
Do you have what you have to read to go to
Thank
executive
you.
session?
Yeah, I'm
All right,
just
good night.
looking for it here.
acceptance number 2, Sean, I believe.
Okay, I request a motion that the board vote to convene an executive session.
10:31.
Purposes to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, and not to return to open session.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, we'll start with Rosie.
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Jamie.
Henry Knudsen, aye.
Bill.
William Wilson, aye.
And Darcy.
All right, so who becomes host and who
Darcy
becomes
did
host and who's got to kick everybody else out?
I'm kicking out everybody that shouldn't be here. I'm leaving Mary Alice for you and taking out HWK.